Well, thank you for the introduction, and just want to make sure the mic works and we're good. All right. So this started with Dave Lee. This was his idea, and so I quickly turned it around and said, "Guess what, Dave? You're going to be a part of this presentation too." So Mindy mentioned that we're City of Inglewood, but we're a lot more than that, and we have a lot of expertise in the room. So this is going to be an open forum. We have a presentation. If anybody has a burning question, you can ask it. At any time. We're going to have a large question and answer time afterwards. And frankly, I'd just like a forum. I wrote down on here that just made a note, and I said experts. And that's why the panel is here. And then I find out that the homeless outreach team from Colorado Springs is going to be here, and they have a lot more experience dealing with this stuff than we do. We learned some stuff, and we have a really good system-wide program, and I just want to talk about that and kind of talk about our panel. We still have one panel member who's due here any minute, and he has a 9 o'clock meeting, so we will kind of work him into the process. We started having some pretty serious homeless issues. We've always had a homeless problem. The City of Inglewood, if you're not familiar with it, and I think most everybody in the room is, we're a core urban city. We're on the southern edge of Denver, and we really have direct access into downtown Denver via light rail and via Broadway, which is a major street into downtown, straight into the homeless shelters. So we really have a pipeline. We have the Zero bus. Those of you in the area, we have the 15 and the Zero, or the huge routes in the metro area. The 15 is the Colfax that takes people all over. And so we've always had an issue, but it has just grown and grown and grown over the years, as I'm sure all of you experience from wherever you're at. I know we have some other, Wheat Ridges here. I worked in Edgewater once upon a time, and same kind of thing. What happens in Denver happens here. Same thing in Aurora, and we really get that. Sometimes when you get out into some of the more suburban areas, the homeless looks a little bit different than it does here. I just saw a news article last night, and somebody that knows something says there were about 4,100 people living on the streets of Denver, homeless during last year. Do we have our numbers? You'll talk about kind of what we're doing with that. One of our speakers is our homeless case manager, and her grandma just died yesterday morning, so Emily is filling in for her, but Emily's been with us for a while. She's one of our co-responders. So talk about the panel. How do we come to this, and why do we get this? So the first person who's going to talk on the panel is Steve Materkowski, and he is with, what do we call that now?
We call it the Mile High Flood District.
Okay.
Known as Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. You can see why we need a name change.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mile High Flood District.
I forgot what it was. I still call it Urban Drainage. And Steve's with Urban Drainage. We've worked with him on a couple of major projects along the Platte River. He has kind of a large perspective because he works throughout the metro area with this issue. He's also a part-time police officer. Are you still doing that?
With Little Town of Empire.
Empire, okay.
Empire.
You were in Idaho Springs.
I was dual commissioned, yeah.
Okay. So he kind of has a dual perspective on it. I think you're an engineer too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Civil engineer.
So very, very different perspective. He brings the urban perspective in. You all know Dave Lee, right? And so Dave kind of brings in the local park management perspective that we have. And Josh is an officer on our impact team. Our impact team, in an agency the size of Inglewood, we're 79 sworn. We don't have the luxury of having a homeless outreach team. So we all get to share in that. The impact team gets any major projects. We get the brunt of doing the work on that. Mike Sandgren will be here hopefully soon. Mike's a pastor, and he runs a local organization called Change the Trend that he's going to talk about. Valuable partnership. Emily has been a co-responder with us for 3 years. since we started the program. She's done some phenomenal work. And the last two speakers we have, Marlo and Stella. Marlo and I have been serving on some groups together at the county level with County Commissioner Nancy Jackson here in this county, in Arapahoe County. And she also is on Change the Trend with us and works at a place just down the street called Bridge House, Ready to Work. And she's going to talk about that program and how that works. She's also a city council member in the city of Centennial. And not familiar with that, Centennial's pretty close here. And she's going to talk a little bit about the political perspective and how that works, and maybe just be a good sounding board for some questions about that. And then Stella's going to wrap it up with how this all wraps together. Stella has lived experience as homeless, so I've asked her to talk a little bit about that, about how, as parks people, can we more effectively deal with the homeless and just be available for those kinds of questions. But she's really got a kind of wrap up piece here of how Ready to Work, actually this all comes full circle. So this group, we have success with this. None of us have a lot of success because we don't have housing. If you're deeply aware of the situation, we just don't have housing for people. And until we do, we're not going to fix the problem. And we do have some people who want to be homeless, but the majority of the people that we talk to and work with really don't want to be homeless. They just don't have the resources for whatever reason to make it to that level. But we do have success because we all work together. And that's really like, what do we bring? We bring this perspective of having like a system-wide approach with huge community support through Change the Trend and other organizations that allows us to go from point A to point B and hopefully do some impact and solve some issues. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Does that sound good from your perspective? Cool. Thank you, Dave. So I'll start off by kind of apologizing. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Normally, this presentation is 30, 40 minutes long. And this presentation is for a mixed group, and a lot of it has to do with, that will be pertinent, the impacts as a district that we deal with this issue. But there's also some safety considerations and things like that. So I'll touch on those things, but I'll try to expedite this. So this is the Mile High Flood District, bordered right here. I specifically work on the South Platte River program as a senior construction manager. As the sergeant mentioned, I'm also a reserve officer for the town of Empire. So I've got, from an operations side, I deal with things from the engineering side and then also from the law enforcement side. But this is specifically from the operations side. The Mile High Flood District takes care of all the major drainage ways within that boundary. Like I said, I specifically work on the South Platte River. And we spend approximately $2 million every year doing routine maintenance. So think of trash and debris that could pose some sort of a flood hazard. That's what we're doing with that money. Our overall budget for construction capital maintenance is much, much larger. But specifically for this issue, those are the dollars that we allot for that. So this is right next to the South Platte River, and you're just going to see a lot of pictures like this. So I'm not going to talk about the causes or anything. I'm just going to talk to you about what we deal with from our perspective, kind of, if you would, the during and then the aftermath. There's a lot of different things that go into this. So again, this is from a mixed presentation. So public perception, these are some of the impacts: public perception, public safety, and environmental degradation. Really today, the public safety, I think that's an important thing. And the environmental degradation, that's something that we are encountering more and more, whether you look at it from the The structures of the channel banks, the channel itself, water quality, those are all issues that are impacted by illegal or unwanted camping. I will tell you, we as a district, we do have a mandate from a floodplain regulation standpoint that we cannot have any sort of habitable structure within a channel within the 100-year floodplain. So our mandate is to protect people, property, and the environment, and we take that very seriously. Keeping people from living in those areas because of the flood potential is very important as far as protecting people. And so we take that very seriously as a district. I'm not going to look at that one. Public safety, potential for crimes, that happens a lot on the South Platte River. We see that both with the issue of camping as well as outside of that issue, but it does affect local businesses in a huge way, the general public. We've been having a lot of problems recently with not just what you would think of was people setting up tents, but literally RV parking. That's a huge, huge issue. Not so much the parking, because that's not what we deal with. We deal with the channel itself, but what happens within those parking areas, and a lot of that is vehicles being worked on, maintenance, different types of substances, grease, oil, things like that, ending up in the flow line for the storm sewers, ending up in the channels. Just a lot of issues that are coming up with that parking. I won't. Okay. Impacts on local law enforcement, that's not my purview today. Impacts on local fire and EMS, a lot of calls there. Okay, here we go. Environmental issues. This is something near and dear to our heart. So protecting the environment, a big mandate for the Mile High Flood District. Impacts to vegetation, impacts to soil and erosion, those two things really go together. A lot of times with camping in the channel itself or along the banks, things are cut in. Stairs, people just cutting into the banks, digging tunnels, digging areas in where a structure can be built. That then leads to the soil erosion, the vegetation's being denuded, and then that leads to the water quality. So now we've got erosion issues because of the runoff, and that creates the water quality issues. For us then, we're having to go back in and try to mitigate that with our maintenance dollars for revegetation. The maintenance costs also, with that first slide you can see, and I'll show you some more slides, our budget is fairly limited. It's based on a mill levy, and so we only have so many dollars to allot. On the South Platte River, 13 times a year we go from Chatfield to Brighton. That's the north and south ends of the district. That's 30-some miles of channel, think both banks. If we're doing that, we only have so many dollars to do that, and then the rest of the cleanups or the rest of the debris removal, it has to be done by the local government. So it's a partnership, but there's only so many dollars to deal with that. Hazardous materials, we find a lot of that within the camps, adjacent to the camps. You'll see some pictures of that. Biohazards. I think Josh or the sergeant are going to talk about the cleanups that we did before, but I remember in one area, in one camp alone, over 1,000 needles. It was 3 or 4 sharps containers full. We've had to change our perspective with our routine contractors in the last year because of just the biohazard situation. They now have fully staffed crews that are fully trained in biohazard removal, training on sharps removal, all those sort of things that go into that. So there's an additional cost to them. Of course, those crews are more costly for us, but again, we provide that to help our local agencies. Okay, we'll go from there. Okay, so this is a camp. The campers have just been moved. This is Commerce City, Adams County. There's some of the hazardous material we're talking about. When we are doing a cleanup on that, We don't necessarily know if that's propane or if there's something else in there. There's indicators. If the brass is tarnished, it might be something else, ammonia, that sort of thing, precursor materials for drug activity. But we have to, that's obviously for our contractors, that's considered hazardous material. Lots of that. So this took our contractor crew of about 6 to 7 guys, skid steers, this whole stretch, which was about a half mile long, took about a week with those guys working full tilt to clean up. Now that's what it looks like after we come in. But you can see, granted, we've run some skid steers and things across there, but the vegetation has been pretty hammered. And this is on a floodplain bench. So now with that lack of vegetation, we get those higher flows. Obviously, water quality suffers, and we get more sediment in the river. That is the South Platte River. We call it a river. It's a dismal river. I understand, but we're trying to do what we can to make the South Platte shine again. Another picture of that. Here's another area out in Commerce City. This was probably a 3 to 4 day cleanup because this extended about a quarter of a mile towards I-76. Yep, this is near Suncor. This is actually on CDOT property. CDOT has their own budget for dealing with this issue. The last I talked to them, I believe it's statewide. It's like about $2.5 million. If we could figure out a better way to deal with this, I can think of a lot of things that CDOT could probably use $2.5 million for, and I know that we could use it, the money that extra money we're spending on this, for other things. But until somebody comes up with a solution, we're just going to keep doing it, at least from an operations standpoint. Those are PV panels. This entire site was pretty well set up from a services standpoint. This is the sort of thing that I was talking about with the RV park. This is a new slide that I added to this, just so you guys could see this. This is Sanderson Gulch. Capital project. Sanderson Gulch just runs up on the other side of where these vehicles are. We spent in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 million redoing the gulch down to the confluence with the South Platte River. This is La Panne, and this last year was fresh asphalt. You can see the staining on the asphalt and in the flow line. That wasn't there before, and that is all grease, oil, other fluids from vehicles that have gotten down into the flow line. And I'm not sure what Denver's going to be doing about this, but they do. This has gotten to where there's this sort of parking is up another street, and it's also on the other side of La Panne now. Another shot of that same area. This is in Denver, down in the Rhino district. This area, if you follow the news, has been cleared many times, and then it just keeps coming back. There's going to be new development just on the other side of this fence. The buildings you can see to the right-hand side of the screen are just being finished up right now. So not sure what's going to be going on with this area long-term other than that development coming in, but I will tell you, the South Platte River is just on the other side of the street from this. And this material, and this is one of the reasons why I have these pictures, is even when we come in and do the cleanups, that material ends up in the river, or a good chunk of it does. And again, that's hurting water quality, that's adding flood debris. If we get a large flow, a lot of those pictures that you saw are on floodplain benches, on the lower banks. We get a large flow, all of that material will end up in, potentially, if somebody was sleeping, thus our floodplain regulations, they would end up in the river. And now we go, and we've got a rescue situation, and unfortunately, a lot of times we end up with a recovery situation, and that's not what we want. Remember, protecting people, property, and the environment. That's what we focus on. Safety perspective. In the last few years, I've been doing this for 20 years on the South Platte River. I've dealt with homeless, I've dealt with camping all that time. But in the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a change, and I don't know what that is. I don't know whether it's because we're not doing a good job addressing the mental health issues or other issues involved there. But there's a lot more safety concerns out there now. This is an example of a trap around a camp. This is one that Jefferson County Rangers sent to me. We encounter all sorts of, from tripwires to stakes to blah, blah, blah. And they're not necessarily, I don't think, out there to try and hurt my maintenance guys or our engineers when we're out there on the river. A lot of it is because of the violence that's homeless on homeless or that sort of thing, and they're trying to protect their areas. But as professionals working along a channel or whatever, or potentially walking into an area where you've got a camp or whatever, that's a concern. And that's not a concern I would have, if somebody would have told me 5 years ago that we were going to have this sort of stuff along the river, whatever, I would have told them they were crazy. But it's there. So this is, we won't talk about this perspective here, that's for a different group. Safety considerations. I think this is important. This is what I try to tell our staff. This is what I try to get across to our contractors, our consultants, our construction guys. Best thing that they can do is practice good situational awareness. And I think that's good for everybody in general, whether you're driving, whether you're walking across the parking lot to King Soopers. Good situational awareness will keep you safe in most cases, or at least help. And when you're out in these areas, when you're out in the parks, when you're out in these channels, that's a great thing to have. We tell our staff to avoid active camps. We don't deal with, from an operations standpoint, we don't deal with getting advocates there. We don't deal with any of that sort of stuff. We let local law enforcement and other agencies deal with that. So we try to avoid, that's our thing, is avoidance when it comes to this, and certainly not instigate anything. We use a teams approach, especially with our interns, have them go out in pairs if they're going out into a new area. And like anything, we tell them, be polite, be professional, but they need to make sure that they're staying safe while they're in the field. Our staff does carry pepper spray. I do the training on that for them. Fortunately, we've never had to deploy that, but they've got that there and they know how to use it. And then just be cognizant for potential hazards. That's it. Okay. Any questions?
How much do you think your crews are encountering this, and is it escalating? I mean, how many miles of camps have you cleaned up, or square footage, or any information like that?
Really, the only way we really track that is just by the numbers. And so I'm spending, between vegetation management involved with this, I'm probably spending $200,000 to $300,000 a year just for my maintenance budget. I would say on average, we deal with, just from the district perspective, on the river, a dozen large camp cleanups. We do a lot of smaller stuff just when they're coming through and doing the routine maintenance. If there's an abandoned camp or obviously the aftermath of a camp, if it looks like it's active, we avoid it. We let the rangers know, then they can deal with it if they need our help. But if it's the aftermath of a camp, we clean that up, and that's just in our normal budget. We're just doing that. So that just adds, filling the dumpsters a little, because we go through 30-yard dumpsters a year. I mean, we go through a lot of dumpsters just for the river. So it's not a very definitive answer, but
Sure.
It's the last part of your question. Is it escalating? It is. I mentioned like 3, 4 years, 5 years. It was not to this level 5 years ago. I encountered so many people camping, homeless, whatever, on the river, But most of them, to be very honest with you, they got to know me. I mean, I wave and say, you know, I carry water in my car, you know, they need a bottle of water or something. You know, very polite or whatever. It's a different, it feels different. I don't know how to define that, but it feels, and it appears to be escalating, and it feels different over the last few years.
If I could just add
Yeah.
to that difference feeling, 5 years ago when I started the city of Dallas, the homelessness was more of a want, like they chose to have almost primitive living in this urban setting type of scenario. But now I'm encountering more dependency issues that is causing their homelessness, you know, and because we actually have, I know earlier the gentleman mentioned about not having the housing. We actually have some housing available for them, but it's the rules that it's in place that these housings that they don't want to abide by because of their dependency issues.
And
And
I've heard that too.
so that's the drastic difference between what we saw 5 years ago in some of our park settings opposed to now is just a tremendous the dependency issue coming into play.
And I would say, to go along with that, 5, 6 years ago, it was rare, I say relatively rare, for me to find needles or my crew to find needles. They would. And I'm used to seeing that. I mean, I've been a cop for 15 years as well. But the volume of that has just seemed to go up and up. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about as far as the dependency issue. So.
Yeah, that's, you know, we could only surmise that it's a dependency issue whenever we have and we're getting away. We used to do a lot of in-house, probably I would say 90% or encampment cleanups were in-house. And we're trending away, you know, we're tapping into endowments, bringing in the professional cleaning guys. And
Right.
it's, I mean, I made a note of the booby traps, you know, because I haven't heard from our guys that, but it's something that we need to make them aware because we still have the occasional ones we clean up that are, you know, our process is, you know, we get a SR, service request. Office of Homeless Solutions goes out there and engages, and they ask them, you know, they offer all the services, give them an order to vacate. There is very few that abide by it, and then they leave their stuff behind. That's where we come in. You know, but in the park setting, all this is just in park setting. But now we've gotten to the point where if it's an elaborate encampment, we just bring in the.
You almost need to bring in the professionals, yeah.
I mean, I hate for one of our guys to get stuck.
I will say that along with that dependency, I just see a lot of obvious mental health issues. I try to take several courses a year on just the mental health aspects of things because I think that's something that is also something that needs to be addressed. But that's way above my pay grade.
I'm
So.
sorry, I mean, but,
Oh, no.
The differences in 5, 6 years ago and now.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you.
And I'm not an engineer. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Lee. I'm the open space manager for the city of Inglewood. I think a lot of what I have to say mirrors what Steve's already said. I come from the parks perspective, and some of it also may mirror what Josh has to present, so my apologies for that. We're the ones that typically find the encampments. Some of them have been there for a while, and I think anybody that knows once it's been there for a while, it becomes more of a mess, and a hazardous material cleanup is in order. What we've tried to do is be a little bit more proactive. We involve our police department first. We notify them so they can get in there and notify the people and have them vacate. This was all taken down along the South Platte River We had upwards of, what was it, about 50 encampments and probably at least 100 people. This is one that went on for far too long. We had a difficult time figuring out who owns the river. So we had to go through Arapahoe County and try to ascertain who actually had jurisdiction and who owned the property. Eventually it did fall to us, and without the help of Steve Materkowski and Mile High Flood Control and our police department, we wouldn't be able to do what we do out in the parks. So I don't have much in the way of, here's a number more parks, of things that we've actually cleaned up in the parks, because we try to get in, get out, and clean it up. But that's kind of our biggest dilemma. We deal with it, and here's a few more of the campments. We deal with it on a weekly basis. It's kind of a cat and mouse game, because when we clean things up or when we move an encampment, those people don't disappear, they have to go someplace. And so it becomes a big issue for us. We remove a camp, they show up someplace else. So that's our big dilemma. But these are all down along the Platte River. This is one of the news channel crews coming in as we were starting this cleanup process. These are Inglewood's notifications. We post them at all the campsites for 72 hours. And Josh, if there's anything in here that you want to chime in or jump in on, please feel free to do so. This is some of what we find. Again, what Steve is talking about is what we encounter too, particularly if it goes on a long time. I am trying to get funding through our budget process this year to get people that are certified in hazardous waste cleanup, because this is beyond the scope of parks. I think everybody that's in here that deals with a park department realizes or can tell me the same thing. Again, the canisters, propane, whether it's propane or not, present a problem for all of us. We have campers that come to our parks because they're a nice place to hang out. We rent out our picnic shelters, particularly over the weekends, and right now we currently have shelters that are unrentable because of the homeless issues around them. People come there expecting to find a nice picnic area for a high school graduation, a grandparent celebration, and they can no longer do that, and we end up refunding money. So we found vacating some of these shelters because we can't rent them in a satisfactory manner is a big issue. So we're losing revenue as well. But these are just some rapid fire encampment sites from down there along the Platte. Again, we've got the solar panels down there. These guys are very ingenious in what they can do.
Hey, Dave?
Yes.
You got some of the pictures that last picture, do you see the water surface elevation? Imagine how little of a release from Chatfield it would take for everybody down there to just be in the water, and then it's a mass rescue event. So, sorry, that was a great perspective, so I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's
If
great.
I recall, this is the house that's built into the bank too, isn't it?
It is, yeah, they had actually dug out the side of the hill, and they had a whole setup. There was a two-room apartment, essentially, that they built in there with electricity, TVs, everything. It was pretty intense.
These apartments go for about $1,800 in Denver right now. You can see they also do landscaping. They're great landscapers. One thing as I'm firing through here that I did want to bring up, we have, 5280 that feeds the homeless right down in downtown Inglewood. We had a problem there with our plaza area. It's a pond area and a little park-like setting around it. They would pick up their lunches and come down and literally camp there all day, and then the trash became a huge issue. And we were down there every other day on complaints cleaning up. We enlisted one of their volunteer staff to come out and help with the cleanups on a daily basis, She would get volunteer homeless people, and we would supply trash bags, pickers, that kind of stuff. And this woman did a fantastic job of recruiting these people and cleaning this area up so it became less of a nuisance, less of an eyesore for us. So these are some of the ingenious things that we've kind of come about to help us on a daily basis. Along with some of the, well, we got a grill there too. We've had park staff had knives thrown at them. Again, from what some of Steve has said, a lot of the people that we encounter, substance abuse, drug and alcohol, I think a lot of mental health is out there too. And then there are some free spirits. Some of the people are very, very nice. We had a Park and Rec Commission meeting at one of our shelters. I came walking over and he said, sir, I'm getting ready, I'm going to clean up. And I said, you've got some time, don't worry about it. And I said, we're going to be here an hour and a half, we have a meeting. And I said, and you're welcome to come back to the shelter. And so he packed up his shopping cart and everything else, and he took off. We have them living in our parks. We obviously have bathrooms with flush toilets, things like that. We've got shelters, so it's a great place for them to go. And we don't begrudge any of those people. It's just sometimes the debris that they leave behind and the uneasy feeling that our park patrons get. We have playgrounds, obviously moms or parents or grandparents bring their kids, and sometimes it's a very uneasy truce between the homeless and our citizens that use the parks. So it's this balancing act. We get a lot of complaints from the public. Why don't you do something? Well, everybody needs to be treated with respect. Everybody's got rights. So it's difficult to tell somebody who's not breaking a law to leave a park, and we don't. So,
If you don't mind me interjecting, but that's the same mentality that DPD, Dallas Police has.
mhm.
It's like when they get called out, and they've already packed up their belongings from the pavilion, because they sleep in the pavilion, charging their phones, whatnot, and they pack their personal belongings in a cart. So at that point, they become park users as well.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, so they become park users as well, and at what point they're not violating any laws at that point, or ordinances. So where's the disconnect? Where they can get them is during curfew hours, but at that point, someone sleeping in a park is very low priority to the priority 1, 2, and 3 calls that City of Dallas is holding at the time.
And that's a very good point. Denver has enacted a camping ban, and I know that's been challenged in a court of law. What Inglewood has decided to do is go by our park hours, which are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So we enforce those. Our police department will go by and cruise the parks, or the impact team. And so when we find them in the park after hours, we ask them to leave and move on. But as long as they're there during the hours, we're fine with it, as long as they're not disturbing people or doing something illegal. We don't allow alcohol in our parks either. So if they're there drinking, obviously that's an infraction on our policies.
Yeah, we were having issues with
Let's get you a mic real quick. We'll just keep one now, maybe one on both sides, and we'll just push it around so that,
Yeah, so we were having issues with the pavilions at our park. So the city ended up putting chains across saying no trespassing, and have picnic benches for people out in the park, but the actual pavilions, they put up chains saying no trespassing, and then we or DART or any patrol officer then can write trespassing any time of day. And that has helped out tremendously with the pavilions in a few of our major parks in the city. So
So do you rent your pavilions out?
We do.
So then somebody would have to take that no trespassing
Yep.
and
So
the
if
chains
it's-
down.
Yep, if it's rented out, then the city will unlock it and take it down for the time that it's rented out, and then once it's done, they put the chains back up and have the no trespassing, so,
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
yeah.
Again, these are some of the things that were in some of these encampments. There's your batteries for your solar power. These are some of our co-responders and police officers just interacting with some of the homeless. Again, I think our police department does a great job of interacting with them and treating them respectfully, and I think most times we get a fair amount of cooperation. What you can't see there, and it's really very difficult, there's a tripwire. Again, we've talked about some of the booby traps. It's not for the outsiders, it's to protect their property and to protect themselves from other homeless people. We did have, it was a stabbing underneath Dartmouth Bridge, and that became an issue too. So there is a lot of homeless on homeless violence, so that becomes a big problem. Again, there's a tripwire in there. It's very difficult to see. There we can see it up close. Syringes, big problem. We tried to put them in our restrooms. We put the sharps containers in there in hopes that when they used the needles, they would put them in the container and help keep everybody safe. We actually had a park employee get stuck with a needle accidentally, taking a bag of trash out of a trash can, and it came up against him. Luckily, he did not get hepatitis or anything, but it's still a very traumatic experience for our staff. The sharps containers were removed from the restrooms because they were breaking into it to get to the needles. So we keep sharps containers in the trucks. Yes, sir.
We're contemplating putting sharps containers in certain areas.
Mike behind you. Thank you.
We were contemplating putting sharps containers in certain areas and bathrooms and other areas where people congregate, and we haven't yet done it, but I wanted to get your take on how that's worked. Obviously, it sounds like you're taking them out now, so.
Yeah, we're taking them out, obviously, and we keep them in the trucks so that when we find the individual needles, the guys know how to do that. We use the pickers to pick them up, the trash pickers, and then place them safely in those sharp containers. And then we hand them off either to the fire department or we take them to the local hospital.
So you find that by not having them, it's safer. How are you finding them now and disposing of them? Are they just being left on the ground?
They're being deposited out on the ground or in a picnic shelter when they're done with them, or sometimes even in the trash containers is where we mostly find them. Or if we have an encampment, we'll find them there as well. But again, we try to get on those encampments as quickly as possible because obviously this one was allowed to go on for about a year, and by the time we all got to it, it was a disaster to clean up. So I think the quicker we find them, we go in and raise vegetation, clear things out because they like to hide into the bushes and the shrubbery underneath trees. So we're doing a lot of that vegetation management. As Steve was saying with Mile High Flood Control, they're doing it down along the river. We have to do it in the parks or in the open spaces.
Yeah, I want to say about a month ago, our city put metal containers in the parks, not by the bathrooms, but for sharps. And I believe they're locked, but I don't know because they just put them in. But yeah, we have two really big, probably about 3 feet tall, where it's a hole where you can put sharps in. And I know they put it at 2 of our parks in the city so far.
Was this something that you purchased or was it something that somebody fabricated?
I don't have
Don't
the
know.
answer to that, but yeah.
It's kind of like the old style mailboxes. where it's
That's-
just a drop
yeah.
in and it closes when you can get into that stuff.
That's a very good idea. Thank you.
One of the things, the vegetation management, I think that's a huge thing it's good not only for the, I'll talk about it. It's good for the environment. In a lot of cases, we need to take out the dead and dying trees. We need to, from a flood standpoint, we don't want that potential debris to get into a flood and then provide stuff that's going to clog up bridges, abutments, outfalls, things like that. But also from an officer safety standpoint. You know, I'm sure you guys most people are rolling one officer to a vehicle. You know, if you can't look down into an area with a flashlight, or you've got to go trooping down in the middle of the night down into one of these thick areas, that's just not, it's just not an easy lift. It's not a safe environment. So there's a lot of things that good vegetation management help with, a lot of things.
Just as my experience as an urban forester and the vegetation management issue of it, because I have worked for cities that had requests from the police department to clear out vegetation so they could see from a roadway into a channel or someplace like that. They could use their big spotlights from their cars. It was a great idea. It's a great safety thing for the officers. The problem that I've seen with that and encountered with that is that as soon as we cleaned the vegetation out, we had like 5 campers there. When we cleaned the vegetation out, we had 20 campers there, because we've now made it easier for them to put their tents up. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. We're trying to make it safer for the officers and doing good vegetation management, removing the dead and dying plants, obviously out of a channel so that you don't have that flood debris. But it also has a cost or an impact that comes later on that I've seen in trying to do that.
That's where our partnership with Inglewood and South Suburban and those sort of agencies, they now have the process in place so that when we have cleaned this out, now if a camp shows up, it's not staying there for very long. They can see it, so it's got to be, you're right. If you were to just go and clean it out and be like, wow, this looks like a KOA. No, you've got to have that good partnership, and you've got to have those processes. You've got to have that legal backing in place to do that, right? So you bring up.
And I didn't have that, so
right.
We went from a 5-camp situation to a 20-camp situation almost overnight.
We did the exact same thing. Steve cleared an area out, and we thought, because they were all hiding in there, and the next iteration, there were the 20 camps there instead of 3 or whatever it was. So, yeah, very, very good point.
So I wanted to touch on Greg's point on, you know, in Dallas, one particular park I worked with the NPOs, with the neighborhood police officers, and they're more of a community engagement unit. So being that way before I got into horticulture and the landscape industry, I did 5 years in dispatch, 911 operator, so I knew the priority system of the calls, and I knew that, you know, I had to work with the NPOs and the community engagement, so that was somewhat top priority for them. Well, at any rate, so they did a what they call a CPTED study. I'm not sure if it was a national but I know they did it stands for Crime Prevention through Environmental Design study, and you know it was great information, but we're learning from each other is that, you know, some of their environmental recommendations or, you know, design recommendations don't adhere to our beliefs in the landscape industry. Like they want to harden some landscape under in a critical drip zone of a, you know, 100-year-old tree. So we had to educate them as well. But we collaborated and with the belief that, or the goal of, we're doing all this for you to keep on enforcing and not just let it go, you know, or we done, get on out, because they you know, they would ask for the right signage for enforcement. We provided all them, so they provided us a long list. Now at the first, we're like, you know, it's great. Our operation was, this is great, except that this is not feasible through landscape design. This is not feasible. So we learned. Now they get up to our park board and they'll present something that is within our power as well. So, but it's great. I mean, working together like that. So they'll provide us the perspective of law enforcement and what we could do to the design of the landscape that'll help them. It may be just signage for enforcement. And it worked good in that one particular part.
I think you bring up a very good point. We've had some of the same discussions where PD wants something clear cut or taken completely out, and it goes against our landscape values and designs. So there's some give and take, and sometimes we can remove some of the things to help mitigate the issue and still maintain some of that landscape integrity. But I think the other thing that I wanted to bring up, as you can see, all the people up here, it takes a village to take care of this problem. We're not solving it completely by any means. If somebody had the answer, it would probably already be done. But it takes local and federal religious organizations, some of the service organizations, some of the facilities and care for homeless as well, to come together and so we can help these people out.
And I will go a step further and say that it takes individuals representing those organizations to have a passion for it as well.
Well, these people
Yeah,
definitely
because
have a passion.
There's a
for
lot
it.
of people that have been plugged in that you're like, oh man, Winford retired from Office of Homeless Solution. They plug someone in there that's obviously just there for a paycheck. And I'm like, oh, big difference, I'm like, man, so it takes a certain kind of passion or drive to fill in and represent that department properly. So I appreciate everything you all do as well.
There's a lot of passion up here, and in the room too. And I can see it with from some of the other organizations. Getting back to this was somebody's last meal, or the Goose's last meal. Again, just a lot of pictures of this large cleanup. Getting down to it again, I can't stress enough, as we find them, we have to quickly take care of them so that they don't grow and fester or more people join an encampment. So again, here's some of the professionals that come in. You've spoken about that. Some of it we weren't capable or trained to handle, and these people come in with full suits and everything else on, equipment that we don't have. Under our bridges. One thing that we did as we cleaned up these camps, we brought everything to the top of the bank, and we made decisions with the help of the police department on what was valuable in personal possessions, and they were all documented as to which of those camps they came out of. And so everything was numbered. We put them into these 90-gallon totes, and we held on to these belongings for, I think, at least 30 days before we disposed of it, so that anybody that lost personal effects could come out and claim their belongings. Because you see a lot of that in the news where people claim that the police swept in or whoever and threw out all their things. And so that makes the news. So we tried to help and mitigate it this way.
Do y'all have a lot of people retrieving their property?
No.
I didn't think so. Yeah, I didn't think so, because some of them have that hoarding mentality that just can go get something else,
Frank, could you hand that?
Have you guys tried to use receptacles, like trash receptacles? They clean up their own camps and they kind of just organize and separate?
Yes, we've
Okay.
done some of that, and it is helpful. It definitely is helpful. We spend a lot more time emptying those than we do in the ones in the parks. Again, this was after we did the cleanup. Thank you to Mile High here. Couldn't have done it without them. And I think that's it.
All right, can you guys hear me all right? All right. So as Dave and Steve have both said before, I'm just going to touch on, we share a lot of the same photos. Obviously, we work together, so a lot of this is familiar, but just to give you guys an idea from the law enforcement perspective, I've been on impact since 2017, and one thing I've noticed is we were kind of tasked with solving this issue, as probably you guys are as well, and everybody in this room knows it's not something we can solve. The only thing that I did when I came to the team was I realized Denver's getting in trouble. They're doing things a certain way, and I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want my name attached to something where I'm going to have to explain later why we're doing sweeps, why we're kicking people out of these camps, why we're determining as law enforcement what trash and treasure is. Because you see, and I see, a pile of trash, just junk. But to them, that's their possessions, that's their house, that's their hoarder mentality, but that's not for us to determine. So one thing that I did, and Sergeant McGrath tasked me with doing, was essentially learning from other people's mistakes. And we're not perfect. We make our own mistakes. We did it the first time we did a cleanup. I think one of the things is obviously trying to get away from the term sweep. Nobody likes that term. We use cleanup. Essentially the same thing, but it just sounds better. Denver made mistakes that allowed us to go back in and change certain things. So Dave has already shared a few of these photos coming up here, but we took drone footage just to give everyone an idea of what we were dealing with, what it looked like before, and it's hard to see through here, but we actually got down in there and were able to do that. The first time we did a cleanup, we went through and we tried to document each camp. We tried to get them to determine some of their trash or treasure. We were down in the camps with them, kind of in the mess. The cleanup was kind of rough. And by the time it was all said and done, we had trucks carting some of their personal belongings to our service center, to our impound lot. And we were just leaving piles of stuff, and it had a name on it. And they could come back and get their stuff. And it did not work well. It was not very smooth. So the second time that we had that in, we had Steve come in, he cleared everything out, and like you were talking, sir, as soon as you cleaned it up, we had a lot more campers the second time. So we figured out, how do we need to combat this? We need to bring more resources in. We need to take a more collaborative approach than just law enforcement and taking care of it from our side. We realized we can't do it by ourselves. That's where All Health came in, and Emily in particular was down there in those camps with us when she first came on. It was kind of like a trial by fire, and it was not pretty.
That's actually Emily down here in the corner.
Yeah.
With, the redhead is Heather, was a correspondent with us.
So obviously, like any major metropolitan area, we struggle with homelessness. I definitely know it's not as bad as Colorado Springs. We did right along with Denver's homeless outreach team, and it's not as bad as Denver's either. But we have our own small little city, so we have to deal with our problem. So this was our second cleanup in May and June. Obviously, again, we cleared out the vegetation the first time. Everybody moved back in. The banks of the river were not solved, so we were trying to figure out how we're going to do this better. I put this map together because when we were going down in this, I was responsible for figuring out where all this property belonged. And I knew going back in, I wasn't going to remember any of this. So I went down into each camp, and what I did was on my phone, I put a GPS ping, and I then input that into Google Maps, and then that's how we documented each individual one. And that also gave us the basis for later on being able to document the property. It's not wonderful. It took forever, and I'm sure there are much better ways to do it, but it's the way that we did it, and it worked for us a lot better this time. So this map that you're looking at, that Dave was showing here, that's our service center. The area we're talking about, it's probably about 4 city blocks. It's not very big. And we had a massive amount of camps. Where you see a gap there, that area pretty much, you can't travel that area. It's either too steep or there's not enough bank. So a lot of these camps were shoved into a very small area. So we had these 19 camps from our service center before we even got to the first major road in Dartmouth. That's about 2 blocks. Under the bridge, we had a couple. It continued. Again, that spot where it's kind of blank there, it's very, very steep, and it's not a place. We did find one camper one time, but not one that we documented. So 38 just on the east bank in about that 4 or 5 block range. And then this is looking at the other side of the river, going back the other way from south to north. So we started with posting. We figured out, how do we do this? We need to make a more humanized approach. We're not interested in being the people who just cleaned it up and got rid of the problem, pushed it along to the next city. We've had that happen to us. We've done it before. It doesn't work. We wanted to bring the resources in. We wanted to make it as humane of an approach as possible, and that started with posting, letting everybody know this is what we're doing. And we're not doing it because we want you out of here, because it's an eyesore, even though we do have complaints constantly. We were doing it for the revegetation, for the erosion, for the issues with the river, the testing samples contaminated. It was a health issue. That was our approach with it. So we posted each and every single camp. We also posted every entrance to the top. I don't know, we zip tied probably 1,000 of these notices along that whole area. With All Health, we had a couple days where a group of about probably 6 or 7 of us were in each camp passing out water, hygiene products, socks, trash bags. That's another thing we used. We went down there and said, hey, we're coming through. If you can start trying to collect this, it makes it easier for us, for you, for everybody. But that's the approach we started with. There you go. There's some of those. We were handing out blankets. Some days were really, really cold. Passing out socks. Just trying to, again, make it as humane as we could. We're coming through here. We have to do this, but we want to help you get the resources you need. Emily helped out a bunch with that because we don't have those resources. And most of the time we say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go to somebody else for help. We just don't have it. And with her here, we were able to have that one-on-one approach. We stepped back, let her talk to them. And we had a lot of people reaching out and getting on board with some sort of help, mental health, substance abuse, something like that. We did have a lot that's the life they chose and they didn't follow up, but we did as much as we could. Obviously, a lot of these same pictures, drug paraphernalia, just weapons, booby traps, all sorts of weird stuff. We had a couple of the booby traps where they set up like a boulder on top of the hill attached to a string or a tripwire, and it would come down as meant to just break ankles. Again, it was not meant for us, but if you get a call there as an officer in the middle of the night for a disturbance, you never know what you're going to run into. Most of these we just happen upon. I don't know how many we didn't. Our biological health hazards, again, you've seen many of these photos, and they're not in there for anything other than to kind of show you the reality of everything that we're dealing with. This presentation was given to a little bit more sensitive group, so we kind of blurred out a few of this. But the maimed, decaying wildlife, the day before we came through our second cleanup was the day we had a guy stab another guy with a katana, and then he was hacking up wildlife down there. So he was having a rough day. There's the tripwires. Sergeant McGrath was actually caught up in the tripwire down there in the bottom. It was wrapped around his boot, and we kind of had to untangle him for a while. That's that apartment I was telling you about. I mean, they had a front door and everything. You go in there, and there's a living room, and you had a bedroom in the back, and a mattress, and lights and TVs, and that's like an industrial tarp. I mean, they wanted that so badly, they dug it out of the side of the hill. And just trash everywhere. Again, trash to me and you, but this was their property, even though it looked discarded to us. One of the things we said was, again, the first time we were in the camp, that was a problem. When we came through the second time, we said, bring everything you want to take, your treasure, your belongings, bring them up to the side of the bank. We'll have a place for you to store it. We'll bring these dumpsters around for you to be able to store all the things that you want to keep. We realize you have nowhere to go, so we'll help you with that. And then anytime you have a place or a truck or somebody to be able to help you come get it, make this appointment, come get all your stuff. We're just holding it for safekeeping. And the thought was along all of that, anything left over is trash. We're going to have our guys come through and just take care of it. And that made it a lot easier because they're not picking around their camp. And the first time, every time someone would come over to pick up a piece of trash, you'd have a resident there say, no, I need that, or this is mine. So we kind of removed ourselves from that equation, which I think helped out a lot. And again, you saw this one, Arbor Forest urban flood or mile high flood district. I mean, we had these guys out here all the time. And that particular day was about 95 degrees. And this guy's in a full Tyvek suit, and I just felt terrible. I'm standing up on the sidelines thinking I'm sweating in a vest, and these guys are out here just dying. This picture on the right here, these guys, we don't know why, but they were just burying their stuff. And it wasn't even, most of it was just trash. They left it behind, but they were burying it. So now that's even more issues because these guys are having to tear up the dirt just to get to the trash to take care of it. Very strange. We just in Inglewood, just on this Platte River, we filled 9 of the large roll-off dumpsters, and those were compacted. Without our parks guys, without all these other people, I mean, again, I just got to sit here and watch it all. But to be down in it, pulling it all up there, it was an impossible task. And for these guys to be able to do it, it took a very long time and a lot of work. And Just hats off to those guys, because there's no way I could have done it. So here you go, you see the documentation a little bit. We just had a piece of duct tape. We'd write down, this is Camp 1 stuff if we had a last name. On the day that we came to clean it, we had the camps that we had documented. Some of them were abandoned. We didn't have a name on them, but we still had their stuff. So we tried to determine as best as we could anything that we thought might be something that was contested. And it did work. And to answer that question, yeah, we had 2 people come afterwards, both of them very well known to us throughout the city as being transient. And they're both hoarders, so they came back for all their stuff and got it carted away. But the rest of it we just tossed. I think we held on to most of these for probably 6 months. It was a while.
Is there a legal requirement for how long you have to keep it or hold on to it?
I think we generally said 30 days. I don't know if that's the exact legal requirement.
I think the precedent was set in Denver with some litigation for the 30 days, and I think we decided a minimum of 60, just because of processes and giving people the benefit of the doubt.
And just a side note, I think I can't remember what the exact number was. I believe we had 57. I think we ordered 60. And so that means 3 of these are unaccounted for that were actually stolen the day that we did that. We did recover 2 of them in Denver where they had moved them to another camp. So we gave them an avenue, and some of them took advantage of that. Arbor Forest worked through the area for vegetation, the reseeding. They brought this big masticator, which is the coolest thing ever, attached to the front end and just tears down some of the dead, dying stuff. Now it looks way different. I mean, it's all kind of grown back, and it looks wonderful. And then we kind of included this slide in here as well because this is an issue that everyone's facing. Could have put Colorado Springs, quite a few pictures from there. But yeah, Seattle. I mean, compared to those cities, our issue is relatively small. We're just trying to take our bite out of it and see what we can do to help fix it. And if you guys haven't seen it, Seattle is Dying. It's a very good video to watch. And we put that in there just for a little more education. So that's the end of mine, guys. Do you have any questions for me? I know we kind of blew through that quick. A lot of these pictures were shared. Again, if you guys want to see this later, we have the drone footage and all that. We usually just play that on loop. Yes, microphone right back here.
Great, thank you. Just curious, when you gave people the option to store their things for 30 days,
Yes.
where did you put it? Like, kind of, who was the point person? What were the logistics of that if people wanted to get their stuff back?
Sure, that's a good question. To store all the property that people had left over, we again used our service center, which is gated access to even get into it. We went a step further. We actually had our impound yard is locked within that facility. So we brought all those dumpsters in there so they were kind of dual locked in there for that protection of your stuff, for your privacy. The dumpsters help with the weather. So obviously if there's rain or anything like that, it protected their stuff. For the 2 that did come back and get it, we have our property manager person through the police department, and we gave them all avenues to reach out to make an appointment. Because obviously you have to drive down there, unlock the gates, get everything going. So they just made that appointment there, and they were able to get their stuff out. And took as much time as they needed to be able to do that. So some people had 5 containers, some people had 1, so it was kind of dependent on the items you had.
Talk about the notices. They had the numbers on there. They were posted everywhere. We gave them the pieces of paper with the numbers.
Yeah, we do have a form that we use actually for a lot of different reasons, but for this one, it's just a property form saying this is where we're going to store your stuff. Here's the phone number, here's the person. And then we tell them as well, you know, if you don't have this or you lose it, just come down to the police department. We'll get you the right person. So.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's a great idea.
Oh, sorry, did you have another one?
We can do that and then come back to
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Was the collection done by city staff, or was it the actual campers that kind of
Well,
put
I
their
think it was-
stuff in there?
Yeah, good question. I think it was a little bit of both. I know we brought the containers to each campsite, and we had them try and put it in there. But I think we also had our staff helping them as well during all of that. It was a multi-week process to get all this done. So.
Was there much detail in the inventory what went in those containers?
There was not. We didn't do that. We kind of left it up to each campsite. Anything you put in this dumpster, it's going to be yours. It's your property. We let them make that determination, so we weren't in the middle of it.
And they were moving a lot of their stuff too with them.
Yeah.
This was kind of almost aftermath.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's left over. So a lot of their stuff they did self-relocate, and then this was what was.
Yeah, they did. Obviously, having to move out of the area, they had carts and trucks and people showing up. But we kind of said, this is your kind of storage. If you have anything left over, anything you can't take. A lot of them, even though we gave them notice well in advance, they waited until the day we went in there. That's just pretty typical of this. So as they're moving through, we're trying to help them with that process. Because even though we tried to do everything we could to make it as smooth and seamless as possible, we still have to get our job done as well. So we still have to get them out of there at some point.
And then my second question was kind of when you're doing outreach, do you like utilize any other community partners that specialize in like harm reductive practices? So like doing needle exchanges on the spot, kind of before it gets to that big cleanup, and kind of preventing it so that other staff don't get, kind of making it safe for everyone too.
That's a good question. I don't believe we had any like harm reduction on site. I don't remember
Not
that.
for needle exchange
Right.
specifically. I mean, we tried to bring in the folks that were local, that were within the community, that were going to be easily accessible. So agencies like Living Heart, which is a day drop-in shelter. I don't think Movement 5280 had moved into Inglewood at that point, but Cafe 180 that does free or PPMA meals. We had representatives and volunteers from Change the Trend, which I don't know if Mike's going to get to be here today.
Mike is here doing another meeting, and then we'll get him after 10.
Yeah, so a lot of volunteers from that organization, which is made up of a lot of different service providers in the area. They brought people down, so we tried to keep it to, here's what you can access within Inglewood. Denver's a whole nother ball of wax when it comes to resources and services, so since they were in Inglewood, we wanted to represent all of available.
Thank you both.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Anything else we can answer? Or? Well, I appreciate your time, guys. Again, this is not the only way of doing it. We're just trying to share and figure out the best way, and we're open to suggestions as well. Obviously, we used other people's mistakes and our own mistakes to fix it, so I know we made some more on this one. So, yeah, thank you, guys.
Do you guys want another 10 minutes here with Emily, and then we take a break, or are we dying and need a break now?
Go ahead.
We'll save the best for last.
You guys hear me okay? So I'm Emily. I am not Brittany Golden. Believe it or not, I'm much more comfortable talking to people like in the middle of Broadway on the median about the voices they're hearing than I am in this environment, so bear with me. And I am filling in, like I said, for Brittany, who is our case manager. I'm one of the co-responders with the department, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between those. But she had a family emergency. Obviously, her grandma passed, so I'm filling in for her. So we're mostly going to talk about the case management services that we have through Brittany with the focus on the homeless population. But I am going to talk a little bit about our co-responder team, since that's how we started, just to put things in context. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been with the department since 2018. Inglewood had had some corresponding interaction, services, experience prior to that, particularly with one of the river cleanups, I believe, was what Bailey helped out with, is that right? But then our team really began in earnest in 2018, and we have grown a ton since then. So we started, just myself, grant funded, 16 hours a week, so 2 days a week at the police department. Since then, we have gone to 2 full-time co-responders covering 80 hours a week. So my coworker works Monday through Thursday. His hours vary all the way until 11 o'clock at night, starting at like 10 in the morning. We have 2 overlap days. I work Wednesday through Saturday, day shift hours, and then a little bit later into the weekend. So we've grown a ton, and that's through support from the city and the police department, through their request to have us more, to have our services more, and then the city has come in and supported that with their budget and funding us to be there. And then most recently, at the beginning of this year, we were able to get a 40-hour-a-week case manager. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Is everybody in here familiar with co-responders? Heard that term, kind of know? Yes.
Yes and a no.
Yes and a no. So co-responding is kind of what it sounds like. It's an embedded mental health clinician that responds alongside patrol. So we go to calls with patrol officers. We ride in the car with them all day long. Inglewood's been so supportive to have us from the very get-go, so they've used us from the beginning. There really wasn't a lot of hesitancy. There wasn't a lot of
pushback about doing things differently. It was, hey, we got a call, get in the car, let's go. So if it seems at all mental health related, substance use related, they bring us along. And then we help by assessing the scene, by assessing, for active mental health issues, assessing for, risk and safety factors, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation. We're all licensed, so we can place people on mental health holds. We can facilitate detox holds, so we help with that kind of stuff. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the different call categories we go to also. I'm not going to get really heavy into statistics or anything, but if you look at the bottom left corner, that kind of breaks down how we categorize calls that we go to when we track data with officers. So we really try and describe the call based on what was the issue that got police called in the first place. So a behavioral disturbance can be anything from somebody walking down Broadway who's yelling and screaming, and a business calls because they're concerned that either the person is unwell or they're causing a safety issue. Behavioral disturbance can also be, somebody acting out or becoming violent in the home. A lot of different things. Welfare check encompasses a lot of different things too. That can be something, ranging from, they haven't heard from this person in a while and they have a history of mental health issues, family member or friend calling, to somebody saying, this is my patient that's been off their meds for a few days and they didn't show up for an appointment. So all kinds of different things fall into that category. Obviously, suicidal ideation, family conflict, so domestic violence situations is usually what falls into that category. Somebody seeing things, somebody hearing things, that's psychosis, delusions, paranoia, thinking people are after you, thinking that somebody's persecuting you, that kind of stuff. And this is a snapshot from 2020. So over time, we created a separate category just for individuals experiencing homelessness. Because we realized more and more we were going, and you'll see our stats kind of change. When we looked at 2021, the previous slide was just for Englewood. This is for all of the agencies that we work with. So we're employed by All Health Network. It's the community mental health agency for Arapahoe and Douglas counties. We have co-responders in multiple agencies within that area. But I think this is true of Englewood too. If we look at our stats for this year, a lot of the calls we were going to, whether it was a welfare check or somebody acting strangely, whatever people were calling about, once you got there, the real issue, it's not necessarily somebody that we need to put on a mental health hold. It's not necessarily somebody that needs to go to the hospital or detox. The main thing impacting their welfare is the fact that they don't have a place to live and that they're homeless. So we kind of started separating out those calls, and that number just kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we've tracked it. Any questions about kind of what we do before I go into case management stuff? I'm actually going to come back to that. So different factors that lead to homelessness and things that prevent people from becoming housed. This is just kind of an infographic that came from a recent, maybe not too recent now, within the past year. It's from, I think it's from the Tri-Cities study.
It's either that or MDHI.
It might be MDHI. MDHI is the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative. But this is something that was put together through a series of interviews with people experiencing homelessness, talking about the factors that led them to becoming homeless, and then what are the factors that are preventing you from becoming housed again now that you are homeless. So it's a multifaceted issue. There are a lot of different factors that come into play. Very rarely is it one factor that led somebody to becoming homeless or that is preventing them from becoming housed again. It's complicated. There are a lot of different needs, and this requires a lot of different logistics for the person to pursue being housed in a stable, safe environment again. So when we go to calls, as co-responders, again, we're looking for active mental health symptoms. We're looking for substance abuse symptoms. We're looking for things that need to be addressed in the here and the now. Otherwise, this person or the community is going to be unsafe. When you start getting into homelessness, this is stuff that takes time to address. This is stuff that it takes someone that you can consistently meet with, a point of contact that you can reliably reach out to or meet with. This is not something we can do in 20 minutes with an officer on scene. It's too complex. There's too much to it. Addressing a lot of these things involves paperwork. It involves applications. It involves appointments. Having a phone, having a reliable way to get in contact. So we realized more and more that this was going to be a tough job for us as co-responders to really dig into. And that's when we really started talking and when we got a lot of support, through Sergeant McGrath, through command staff, and then eventually City Council to bring on a case manager whose focus was really going to be on this population and addressing some of this stuff. So I'm going to go back. I'm not going to talk a lot about statistics, because Brittany put this presentation together, so statistics can always be taken out of context, right? And I think we also know that the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in the Denver metro area are pretty underreported. But at least through somebody that we partner with, Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, they have a tracking system and basically like a data management system that people put in. Well, technically we put in their information to apply for housing, and that's called the Homeless Management Information System. So just the people tracked through that in the 7 major counties in the Denver metro area, they have 31,000 people enrolled. And I believe that's probably from last year is where she pulled that number. But like I said, I'm not gonna go too far into statistics. I'm gonna talk more about kind of what we do and what Brittany started to do since the beginning of the year. So like I said, she came on at the beginning of the year, and then just in Englewood, she has identified 191 unique people, so not people we're running into multiple times, because there are plenty of those, but unique individuals who are experiencing homelessness just within Englewood that she's come into contact with through her work with the police department. I'll talk a little bit about the VI SPDAT, which is an assessment tool with a really funny name that she's completed with folks. So that is an assessment to connect people with housing or get them on the wait list for housing in the Denver metro area. So she's done 45 of those just since the beginning of the year. And then we've gotten, I think might be more than 3 now, because I don't know when she put this together, but some individuals in the community enrolled in the program that these lovely folks run. And they'll talk more about that, obviously. So it's really made a big difference to have her not being attached to calls, and she's out a ton in the community. I mean, she's still out with patrol. She's out with the zone officers that really focus on the areas of the city where the homeless population is most prevalent and most visible. She's out in the community all the time. But because she has a little bit more flexibility with how she spends her time, we have people coming to the police department saying, hey, I'm here for my appointment with Brittany. I've got to do that housing assessment, whatever that thing is that she does. And they'll come in, which I think has turned into a really unique situation, that you come to the police department asking for help and getting connected to, these housing resources and wait lists, which again are not perfect and they're not sufficient enough for the need, but you have to start somewhere. So I don't think I mentioned too, she also spends 1 morning a week at the local day drop-in shelter that's in Englewood, Giving Heart. They're only open 2 days a week, but she spends a few hours every week in the morning there just doing these assessments and meeting with people about resources. And then just a quick explanation of what the VI SPDAT is. I had to write it down because I've forgotten what the acronym stands for too. It's a Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. Just basically a lot of strung together words that just describe, it's usually about a 20 to 30 minute interview essentially, assessment, talking about all of the factors in your life that have contributed to you becoming homeless and the things that are preventing you from getting housed again, kind of like we were talking about that in that infograph. So basically the more things that you say yes to, yes, I have a mental health issue. Yes, I have a chronic medical issue. Yes, I have difficulty finding employment because of mental health or medical issues. Yes, I have a substance use disorder. The more you say yes to those, the higher you are prioritized on that wait list through that data tracking system for getting matched with housing. We don't have any control over the matching. It's a different agency, that's MDHI, that does that. But you have to meet with a service provider to complete that tool just to get in the system. It's not something you can go online and just fill out yourself and then submit. You have to be with a service provider to do that. So it's made a big difference. It was one of the things that we were running into as a big problem as co-responders is we don't have the time to sit down for 30 minutes with somebody and do this assessment. Bringing her on, she's been able to do that. So that's made a big difference too. And also you can do it as an individual, you can do it as a family unit. Obviously you get prioritized differently if you have kids. We do have plenty of families that we run into, both as co-responders, as Brittany, the case manager, patrol. They're just less visible. They're couch surfing, they're staying with friends or family. They make a point not to be as visible, but there's plenty of families in our community too that then it kind of changes your prioritization in this as well. So, I think that's it. Any questions, thoughts? Break time?
How long of a break are you taking?
10 usually means 15, so.
9:45?
Good morning. I'm Marlo Alston, and I am the Community Relations and Development Manager with Ready to Work Aurora. When I'm speaking, I'm often wearing 1,000 hats, as I often joke. As you know, I sit on City Council with the City of Centennial, and I also do policy work, obviously, by being on council. So I'm coming from 3 hats today: personal, City Council, and Ready to Work. So I wanted to start by just telling you a little bit about myself based on the comment from the gentleman from Dallas, I believe. Yes. Okay, so he made the statement that you have to have a passion to do this type of work. And that's how it started for me personally, with a passion. I have never been homeless on any aspect. I have been blessed enough to come from a really well-to-do family, and it's my passion for other people that got me into politics and into mental health as well as homelessness. So I wanted to start that by letting you know my lenses that I'm putting on. And as I transition throughout my conversation with you today, I'll often say, okay, well, I do this for the city, and this is why we did this. However, when I go into my PowerPoint presentation regarding Ready to Work Aurora and the benefits of a program like what we do would benefit anyone, anywhere, and why you should consider speaking with us offline or ask questions regarding what we do. So the City of Centennial, just to let you know, we are a city newly formed. We are in the process of celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So we are learning from experiences of tri-counties and Inglewood, specifically Dallas. I was on vacation in Hawaii, seeing some of the huge homeless encampments. So we're learning. This is something that's very new to us regarding how to deal with our homeless population. In saying that, Centennial is the 10th largest city in Colorado, and we are also the safest city in Colorado, the largest, safest city. With everything that's going on with other cities, we border Littleton. We're in the middle of Greenwood Village, and then we have Aurora that's on the 4 east of Centennial. We're really long. So I just want to give you a perspective of where we are as a city and why we did some of the things that we did. Not that it solves the homeless problem, but it gives us a legal stance on how to approach homelessness within our city. So a couple of years ago, we passed a camping ban. Because our city is new, we didn't have anything in place to say if someone is sleeping in our park, that's award-winning, that we have our constituents that come there with their grandchildren, our children, and we have paraphernalia, as you all know, in the parks that's causing great concern and possible harm. So what we did is we worked with our sheriff's department. We are a contract city. We do not have our own law enforcement. We have Arapahoe County. and they do a great job. I cannot thank them enough, because one of the reasons I moved to Centennial was because of the safety aspect and being able to go to the local grocery store or walk my neighborhood without bumping into someone sleeping on the sidewalk. And so in saying that, my passion for doing what I do personally and as a political person came to a full circle by me being employed with Ready to Work Aurora. Another thing I wanted to thank Emily and All Health. One of the things that I did when I was first elected regarding mental health was we did not have a co-responder program. I thought that that was, frankly, stupid, to say it nicely. It was stupid. We have people that deal with mental health. We have people that are in certain states of minds that law enforcement may not always be the best person to de-escalate something, even with crisis intervention. So I worked with Chief Glenn Thompson. Love him. He was amazing in helping me put together a form, a presentation to present to council, letting them know the importance of having a co-responder program. Our co-responder program is very different from other cities, and by saying that, that means that, for instance, All Health, our licensed clinician does not ride along with law enforcement. They actually have their own car because they need to be able to go throughout the city, and not every call requires them at this time. So, on to Bridge House, now that you know a little bit about why I do what I do and why we put certain things in place. I also have to thank, and I had to write it down, Steve, Maha Flood District. You guys presented to council about a year ago, virtually, and talked about the storm drainage and showed us some of the pictures that was happening with the camps that were happening within our city and the storm drainage. So thank you. So as you can tell, just from a policy aspect, everyone on this panel is touched by what we do. And with the city of Centennial, we passed our camping ban because we listened to our constituents. We did not have 30 people, 10 people come and protest at our council session, but we received emails from people who said, please take care of our city, take care of our property, and that is what filmed a two-sided coin. I sit on impacting homeless with Arapahoe County because of my passion regarding helping our unhoused population, not because of recognition. No one knows that I do it. I don't do it for that. I do it because I want to be a resource and be able to share the information. And I sat on that committee with Reed, with Commissioner Nancy Jackson, who sits at the helm of that with Arapahoe County, and other people in the room that also wants to do the right thing for our cities, our county, our states, and our country. So with Bridge House Ready to Work, Bridge House is our mothership, so to speak. It is housed out of Boulder, Colorado. Ready to Work Aurora is where I work out of regarding our three-tiered or three-stool method that has been proven to work. We are the only organization in the state of Colorado that has a work-first model. We believe that if you put people to work first and give them a place to stay, as well as give them the support that they need, that they can be successful when leaving our program in a year. Again, the model: housing, support, work, success. We've figured out that this is a sustainable business model. It breaks the cycle, because if you get someone to working and they have that income to be able to withhold their rent, their utilities, their basic needs, that they will remain in place. When entering our program, we have 2 levels upon entering. They come in, they can come from anywhere. Referrals, we can approach them in a camp that's at 9 Mile across the street, or somewhere on a corner, and they come into our house. We interview them, we give them water, we see if they're a good fit, and if they're a good fit for us and won't disturb the housing model. We have 50 beds at this location. We accept men, women, LGBTQ+. Everyone has a place in our house. Work. We put them to work, whether it's outside in our parks, recs, and I'm gonna let Stella talk a little bit more about that, or if it's in the kitchen, making our well prepared brownies prepared by our staff and some of the trainees in the program. Because they do have state benefits, they're only allowed to work up to 29 hours per week. But the key part is they're working, they're making money, they're saving money in this program, and they're also getting used to paying rent after a certain amount of time. They pay for their board there. Housing, 3 meals per day. They take care of where they live. I walked into that place in a total disbelief for what I was seeing. It really does look like, or actually better than, a college dormitory. You walk into that door, the front doors of that place, you're greeted by a receptionist, a trainee. You have a nice conference room to the left. You have people that's just walking around happy, singing, praising God, doing whatever they want to do. It's amazing. We are not a one and done type of house. And what I mean by that, which most of you probably already know, is with substance abuse, you have relapse with alcohol, drugs, whatever the case may be. We work with our partners and we get them the resources that they need so that they can go get the help and then come back to the program. And they do not have to worry about losing their bed or their stability. The support that we have with our programs for them is absolutely amazing. From mental health to job resources. We have people that are electricians. We have people that are going to school or went to school. We put them in jobs that they can live off of. We work with other organizations, other companies up and down Havana and other cities so that we can get them the work that they need, making more than minimum wage, making more than what someone may want to pay them under the table for not having a permanent home. And also, part of that support and programming, And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail regarding that. But as we know, just by looking at some of the pictures and the videos, that our unhoused population are often the highest population for being assaulted, whether it's sexual, whether it's violence of whatever magnitude. Programs like working with the Blue Bench in Denver come in and talk. Doctors come in and they test them for COVID. They get vaccinations, they get dental, all of that, that they may not have had, yet them being in our program. The impact, again, immediate impact. They come in from off the street, we give them some water, we interview them, we have a nice conference room to the left when you walk in. They come in, we interview them, talk to them, and right then and there, within 3 hours, we know if they're going to be coming into the program as an intern. Graduation rate, return on investment, 72%. Mainstream employment, housing. What does success look like? Someone graduating from our program, not coming back into the program or becoming unhoused within a year or sooner. Capacity, again, these are just some stats showing we have our Boulder House where our main office is, and we're Ready to Work. Aurora is up under that, and they have 44 beds. The graduation rate overall combined 70. Due to COVID, a lot of things were slowed down, but it's definitely picking up at this moment. And the social enterprise, again, that's our kitchen, our brownie entrepreneurship program enterprise, as well as our landscaping. Transforming lives, these are some testimonies as to how people feel blessed. I'm not sure about a lot of cities, but in Aurora and our surrounding cities, we have a huge faith base that does this work on a continuum basis. And it makes it possible for people like me to do what I do and to be able to say, just because you're doing this does not mean that you cannot be an advocate and love what you do to help other people to get where they need to be to feel whole. That is the end of my presentation. I know I went through a lot and went kind of fast, but I did want to make sure that I got everything in a short amount of time, and I'm open for questions. I was very diligent in printing out some things regarding the ordinance that we passed regarding our camping ban in Centennial. Even though we know that it won't solve the issue of homelessness, we are trying to find a way to put money towards other organizations like Ready to Work Aurora, Bridge House, to help do the work, which is why I love being with the city of Centennial, because we actually are putting the work in where it needs to be in helping the population that deserves it, and that's our homeless brothers and sisters. Yes, sir.
What's the website?
My apologies. It's it's right here. Yeah. It's Bridge House, Ready to Work. It's like it's Bridge House Ready to Work, because Aurora is very different.
Is it the readytoworkco.org?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. But you'll see Bridge House pop up, and that should take you where you need to go. Yes, sir.
Are the folks employed directly through the city, or are they employed through Ready to Work?
No, it's not. They're not employed by the city. They're employed by Ready to Work through contracts. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that individuals can get into this program through referrals. You don't take referrals from
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're there 24/7. And the front desk always has someone there. Yes?
Sorry, I forgot. For these individuals, do they need to be a resident of that specific county?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. As we know, our homeless residents are very transit, and so to be able to serve everyone, regardless to their statute or where they were raised, we have people from out of state that's here. A young lady came in, and I was fortunate enough to be in the office that day, and I sat in, and she was from Texas. And so we literally will take anyone other than someone with a severe mental illness like bipolar. We don't have a doctor on staff to be able to manage that. We don't accept anyone that has a sexual assault, because we do have a wage use program where we do take people that are out of the jails and prisons, and they cannot have an arson on file, which is a lot of homeless individuals. In the city of Centennial, one of the issues that we hear often is individuals on the opposite side of a fence with a fire, a burner. And that's where a lot of concerns come in, just that fear of someone burning down the home or injuring or losing lives. So again, I am very grateful for being here, and I thank each of you for what you do, because it makes my position a lot easier. Something, if I may have an ask, is we would like to see the people that's actually doing the work. The city of Centennial, we have Arapahoe Parks and Recreation, and we hear things, but we don't actually hear from the people that are out there doing the work and cleaning up the encampments. It's at a very, very high level, very removed, which is why I love what I do, and being able to communicate with people and let them know that I care. Bring it to me. If nobody else do anything, you can count on Marlo to mention it and bring it forth. And I do that every chance I get, whether it's talking about the different aspects of homelessness, whether it's talking about the different resources that are out there, whether it's my personal church, Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church, that's helping, or if it's going to be my friend here that I recently met. So come and speak to your council. Don't leave it to just one or two people to come and speak on behalf of what you're doing. It really matters when you come and you let your face be seen and your voice be heard. Sorry.
My name is Stella Watts, and I am the manager of outdoor operations for the Ready to Work Bridge House program. So we do a little bit, you've heard a lot about what the Bridge House is. So how does this actually help what you guys do out on the parks? We subcontract, so you guys had some questions. So at this point in time, we subcontract out our gentlemen that come into the program. So right now we subcontract with the city of Aurora, and we work in every different part of the divisions. We have a forestry division, Parks and Rec pros. We do some irrigation work with the city guys, of course, the supervising open space. We also just do a little things down on like Elmira by the Martin Luther King Library, and we just have a new partnership with Consolidated Service Group of Denver, and we work on the Colfax Strip. So we have the Colfax bid and different things like that. So we are out there with you guys when you are running into these camps, into the different situations that arise that are out there, like with these gentlemen, that's what we do. So we bring these trainees in, and we evaluate them. We make sure that they're a good fit for our program, and that we're a good fit for them. Because like we said, some guys are comfortable in what they do. They want to stay on the street. They don't like having no rules. They don't want to get sober. They don't want to find help. Cool, but we've planted that seed that, like, when you're ready, we're here, you know? So once they're in our program and we get everything going for them, we issue them uniform, you know, we start doing the training, like, how do you communicate to the public? Because a lot of these guys haven't had jobs, or they've been incarcerated for a number of years. So the institutionalization, or just the comfortableness of the camps, the messiness, you know, the little things that go with that, like, we are retraining them how to live. So including with the work. They're not professionals by all means, but that's when the open space and the city guys come in, because you guys are trained. You guys know the rights and wrongs and what you want done on the job. So when we send our guys out to you or out into the community, we hope that you can give them just a little bit of guidance, not by like communicating, but you can if you would like, but more of like, good job today, like, it looks good, these are the directions how I want it done, and leading by example. While we're out there on the job sites, like, we're walking through the parks, we see the camps, all of that good stuff. We are not just out there picking up around the camps and stuff, like, we're networking. We're like, hey, what you guys doing over here today? You know, like, I see your area's messy. Like, would you guys like a couple trash bags? Like, okay, pick this up. On our way back by, we'll pick it up as well, throw it in our truck. You know, and then the general conversations of, why are you out here? Like, I was out here too, you know, because you know the saying of, it takes one to know one. Like, one addict helping another, they'll listen. One homeless person helping another homeless person, they'll listen. But a professional coming in, like, hey, you guys are not doing this right, they're already shut down, because they feel like there's somebody up here on a level talking down to them. So when we send our guys out there, they listen. Some do, some don't, you know, but it's like that connection that they find. So we've planted that seed, we've handed the cards, we've opened the doors, you know, to every little avenue to help make the jobs easier for you guys, for everybody in this room. That's our goal, to save money, to get people off the street and stay off the street. So we are giving them the housing, we're giving them the support, the everything, the job, and then it's their decision, you know, to run with that. And we also do a year of aftercare. So once we've got them housed, we have aftercare for them. And they're working their real job. We're checking in with them every month, like, hey, what's going on? Some people relapse, cool. Let's help you out. Let's get you into some more therapy. Let's, so that you don't go back into the street and bring all your buddies that you met in our program with you and cause more camps. We don't want that. We want to find a solution. We are hoping that what this does is opens a mainstream to every city everywhere. Not just the Denver metro area, not just Aurora, not just in Boulder, but everywhere. Like, that this workforce solution can hit nationwide, and that we can help people get better through programs like this. I know this program works because I went through this program. I was homeless for many years, in and out of incarceration. Like, the police officers knew me by name, like, oh, here comes Stella again, you know? But they helped. Every time that I got a ticket, every time that I got arrested, every time I was dressed, for any reason, it helps. Because you plant that seed that, like, hey, you're better. Every moment that, like, a city worker says something, or a police officer's like, what are you doing out here again? Like, didn't we just take you to a shelter? Yeah, you did. They told me I couldn't drink. Oh, well, we're taking you back. So those little seeds that get planted grow eventually. And then one day it just clicks in people, like, why do I have to live like this? I don't. There is resources and tools out there. So the more that the city workers know, the police officers know, the health workers know of these different resources and places to go, people get better. Then they get their kids back. They get their families back. They own a dog. They get married. All the little things that keep people healthy. But it all starts with working. You have to have the support, the housing, and the work, and the want. You have to want to do that. But our program works because I did it, and it's amazing. And if you guys have any questions, I'm open to questions. We're open. So I guess the kind of work that our guys do, before I stop, the kind of work that we do is like landscaping, trash pickup, cleanup. Like I said, we work with the forestry department, so we cut down trees. Just like all the stuff that takes, you guys are busy doing your other jobs and that nobody wants to do, that's what we do. It's a humbling experience, and we do it for a reason, because we know that we've seen homeless people are smart. Like, they're putting up jumper cable batteries to run solar panels. Like, these people are not unintelligent people. They just need a hand up. We're that hand up. So we try to keep our jobs like easy enough that anybody could do it, just to get them into the training of wanting to work again. All right. Yes, sir. I saw your hand go up.
I think you answered part of the question whenever you said you went through the program. But my question was going to be, if you've seen anyone, have y'all been in existence long enough to see members or participants of the program go and land a full-time job with the city or anything like that? Because, as y'all are mentioning this program, I'm writing notes down thinking, we have community program coordinators. I'm going to, go back and have them seek an agency or a third party that will allow us to, through them, employ them, not have to go through all the red tape or whatnot, and have some of our even just tedious task of shoreline cleanup along the lake. From there, it might branch off into full-time employment. But I also want to take time and mention something that, one thing you mentioned was, having that connection, and I stress to my guys every time, I try to let them know the difference between sympathy and empathy, and what you all have to offer that's been through the program. Y'all could empathize with them. That makes a big difference. That opens the listening, and so I applaud you for that, and it sounds like I got a good program.
Yes. So to answer your question, yes, so we have had, just for the city of Aurora, I can't really speak on Boulder too much. I know they hire a lot of people through their different departments, but I only run Aurora, so that's what I know. We have hired 2 people to the forestry department and 2 people with open space and 1 with the pros department for the city. Also, Consolidated Service Group, I call them CSG because it's hard to say that. But CSG, they have been taking, they're felon friendly, and a lot of our guys come with a lot of extensive backgrounds. They are a very good paying job. They pay their guys, I think, 17 to 20 an hour, and we've hired 4 people there so far. Yeah, they're the purple people that run around Denver everywhere. That's Consolidated Service Group. Yeah, that's who goes with them. But yep, we do get a lot of city workers, doing the recommendations, like, hey, keep an eye on this guy. He's good. Like, he shows up every day. I don't have to tell him what to do. Like, what's his background look like? And then we'll have that conversation with them to see if that's a route that they're interested in, But yes, we do hire. The city does take them. You guys have any other questions? Yes, Marlo.
So, how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to find out more about the one-off job opportunity?
So I did lay a few of my cards down on the table if you guys have any questions. These ones right here too. Yeah. So if you are also from another city and you're looking to start something like this in your city, I can get you in touch with our higher up people, Miss Melissa, and she can refer you on how they built it, because Chad, Wid, Melissa, and Miss Isabel are our co-founders, and they have built this from the bottom up because we are a nonprofit, and they saw this dream and focus, and now we have 2 buildings and hoping to open up another 3rd one in Inglewood area, so Tri-Cities. that's above my pay grade, guys. But yes, and I think that's all I have. You guys don't have no more questions. Thank you.
For everybody. Well, thanks for the invitation. Again, apologies for my tardiness. I also don't have any slides, so I apologize for that either. 2017, Chief Collins in the city of Inglewood, newly retired Chief Collins, was recognizing that, I don't know if you all can relate, but upwards of 50% or more of the calls that his officers were going out on were relating to homelessness in one way or another. You know, it was the resident with somebody in their alley, the business owner with somebody in their lobby, just saying, hey, we don't know how to engage. Can you engage? So Chief Collins had a vested interest in exploring what the city of Inglewood was doing collectively to address the issue, how he could equip his officers to engage more productively in those situations. And so he got together with the leader of the Pastors Network that does some organizing around the faith community in Inglewood to sponsor a series of meetings through the spring and the summer of 2017, really centered on those questions of what are we doing, who is working on this issue in Inglewood, what are the gaps that we're currently experiencing, and then is there a pathway to work a little bit more collaboratively on this issue. So there are 4 meetings during the spring and summer. At the end of those meetings, the facilitators said, a show of hands, who'd be willing to start meeting on a regular basis to try to start working on homelessness together. And so several of us who were in those meetings raised our hands, started meeting every Thursday morning, and we continued to meet every Thursday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. As the Change the Trend network. So that was the beginning. It was as ambiguous as go work on homelessness. So there were several of us at the table from the beginning, and I think all of us, if we're being truly honest, had been part of efforts before where people get together, say we need to work together more, and everybody agrees, and then 3 months later it kind of fizzles out. One of the things we recognized from the get-go is that this effort felt a little different. The amount of long-term commitment that existed, the diversity of the group at the table every Thursday, and then the support from key leaders in the community made it a little bit different and made it set up for long-term success. So that initial group comprised of me. I'm actually on staff at a church in Inglewood, Wellspring Church. Reed was part of it, so the police department, a couple nonprofit leaders in the city were part of it from the get-go. We recognized we were kind of in it for the long haul, and so originally we were called a task force. We stopped calling ourselves a task force, started calling ourselves a network, branded ourselves Change the Trend, and put 2 pathways of long-term work in front of ourselves. Number one of the things we recognized in those initial meetings was that we were actually doing a relatively good job of serving people's needs while they were experiencing homelessness. You know, we have a lot of food banks, a lot of community cafes. We have some emergency shelter in the area. But when it came time to actually journey with somebody from the streets to stability, that's one of the things we recognized as a gap. You know, that's why we're excited about further relationship with folks like Bridge House, because they know how to do that. But that was a gap that we identified right off the bat. So we kind of said, well, we all kind of know the same folks. We all serve the same folks. Let's try to work together on helping some of those folks out of homelessness, and let's do it by name. And so we started, you know, just doing what we now know is case conferencing, which is actually a best practice that we kind of stumbled on. But we all started to work together to say, hey, you know, Rich needs housing. You know, who can put him up in housing? He also needs mental health support. So All Health Network, you can help him there. You know, and just working together and being together every Thursday to work together to serve the specific needs of our friends who were journeying out of homelessness. So that resource navigation was the first pathway of long-term work we put in front of ourselves. And then the second pathway was community engagement. So we recognized that naturally as a network, we had more of a platform than any one of our agencies did on their own. And so we just sought to steward that platform to educate our community a little bit more, to bring more stakeholders to the table, and to really rally kind of our whole community to take collective responsibility around the issue of homelessness rather than outsourcing it to one sector or another. So for the first 2-3 years, we would do community engagement every other week and resource navigation every other week. We sponsored a couple of events during 2018, monthly events during 2019, which was way too many. So we were engaging the community, started to see our network grow, started to see some of our friends move out of homelessness into stability through this case conferencing work. And then when COVID hit, we switched to a digital format. We used to meet in person, switched to a digital format, saw an exponential growth to where we were about 10 to 15 people before COVID. This morning's meeting, we had about 30, 35. We've seen 50 people on the call every Thursday morning in the last year and a half. To be honest, for the first couple years, I was a little confused why people kept coming back every Thursday. A weekly meeting is a pretty high commitment, and so it was a little surprising to me that folks kept coming back every Thursday. And I didn't feel like I had good language to describe the specific value added. Clearly, folks were getting something out of participating in this network. It didn't really feel like I had a good way to describe specifically what that value was. And then actually during lockdown last year, I read a book on social capital and realized that that's really what this network adds to the community, is social capital around the stakeholders in addressing homelessness. So some of the metrics for that is trust between different sectors of a community. For example, in the city of Inglewood, the service provider community and the police department have never had a more trusting, deep relationship. And that comes as a direct result of being around a table every Thursday morning for upwards of 4 years now. Just getting to know one another, starting to partner, starting to see some cross-pollination in each other's work with the advent of the co-responder program, the hiring of a case manager recently, and also trust to the point where, when camps get out of hand along the Platte River and the police department has to go mitigate, the service providers actually show up and help make that process go as smoothly and as humanely as possible. And it's a collaborative effort rather than an antagonistic relationship. So trust is huge, a byproduct of the network that we've built. Collaboration as well, just partnership in individual work of all of our network agencies. Good example there is during COVID, one of our network agencies, this kind of small nonprofit called Hat Force, that was started out of a local Episcopal church that does motel sheltering on severe weather nights. They were awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually shelter 30 to 40 families continuously from March 2020, actually all the way through April of 2021, continuous sheltering during the pandemic. They were equipped to shelter, but they weren't equipped to do telehealth services, deliver meals, do some of those wraparound services. So what we saw was this network rally around them to where we had police officers delivering meals to the families in the motels, other organizations cooking and providing that meal, other health-based nonprofits providing telehealth services to these families, other case management firms coming in to help think long-term about how to connect these families to housing after their sheltering stay was up. So it was this service that was being provided by one of our network agencies that was done in a much more excellent way because of the resources that they had at their disposal through the partnerships of the Change the Trend network. So collaboration is that second piece. And then the third piece is capacity for collective action. That's the third metric of social capital. We've been able to see multiple shared projects come to fruition and be pulled off successfully over the last 3-4 years because of our existence as a network. Most notably, when the Tri-Cities Homelessness Policy Group decided to do a demographic assessment of family homelessness and chronic homelessness, they contracted with a research firm out of DU, and the researchers came in, but the network really rose up to provide space, provide access to the homeless community to be able to do interviews, mobilized their volunteers, offered their space, and this research project went off very successfully, really because of this capacity to take on a collective project like that that just existed within the network that we manage. So those are just a few examples, but what we've learned, what we've kind of stumbled upon is actually the power of this networked approach that builds and invests social capital in addressing an issue. What that actually does is, in any community around any social issue, there's usually kind of the ground level stakeholders, service providers that are having their own outputs towards addressing the issue, right? Like the shelter providers, the community cafes, the food banks, all of them are doing great work to address the issue. And then there's the kind of the coordinated government response. And then when it comes time to actually implement some of those shared projects and be more streamlined collectively and take that type of collective responsibility, that's where kind of building out the network and social capital really can facilitate that, to where we actually have been able to build this entire new layer of outputs towards addressing the issue because of that social capital that we've built over the last 4 years. So we're actually moving into a season of taking on new, bigger shared projects, like incubating a navigation center in the Tri-Cities region, which is a nationwide best practice that, again, Bridge House has actually hosted one in Aurora before, but it's a kind of a one-stop shop, brick and mortar place where folks who are on the streets can be referred, and it can be the connection point to all of the services that are needed in order for them to be served well. So we're taking on that project of actually standing one up in the Tri-Cities. We're also taking on the project of implementing the Built for Zero framework, which is a data-driven approach to move a community towards what's called functional zero, which is actually the solution to homelessness, which is making homelessness rare, brief, and one time in a community. So Built for Zero actually has a goal of reaching functional zero for veteran homelessness by 2022, 2023, and so we're doing our part to move in that direction around veteran homelessness. That's what we're targeting first with the Built for Zero framework. But all of these projects are projects that require the buy-in from all of the ground level service providers, and how we get that buy-in is through investing social capital and building social capital and investing it through this networked approach. So my encouragement to all of you, I know there's some folks here, I think, that actually participate in our Thursday meetings. If participation in a network like Change the Trend would be helpful to you all as you kind of interface with homelessness in the course of your regular jobs, would love to link you to the Thursday meetings, 9 to 10. We have some folks who are faithful weekly attenders, some folks who are monthly or quarterly, kind of pop in when they can. We keep it very open and flexible to folks' level of engagement. We obviously, all of those metrics of social capital would be what you can expect from gaining from participating on Thursday mornings. And then also there's a lot of intangibles, information sharing, partnership building, a lot of networking opportunities that come from participating in that type of initiative. So would love to connect you there. And then also just beyond that, I would also just echo Reed's comments around just the importance of a networked approach to any issue. One of the things we've realized too is that we actually have a lot of agencies that participate in our network that their organization actually only peripherally relates to homelessness. A local food bank is a good example. Like, they're focused on food security, but obviously, there's a lot of overlap with the issue of homelessness. And but for them, as they go about their food security work, being able to have this network at their disposal to connect folks who are experiencing homelessness in their services is just of deep value. So I would imagine that a lot of you maybe fall into that category of, you're not necessarily like direct service providers for homelessness, but homelessness is an issue that you interface with on a regular basis. And so being connected to a larger group of people who are...
Just very briefly, just wanted to mention too that City of Inglewood's got a homeless action team. We meet monthly, and on that team is everything from the city manager's office, Public Works, the library, Parks and Recreation, utilities, the police department. And one of the things that we came up with earlier this year, in Parks and Recreation, we do all the special events for the city. We do the Christmas holiday stuff, Easter egg hunts, 4th of July, kids stage, summer concert series, things like that, the block party. And we thought it would be nice to have a special event for the homeless. So Reed and I are currently putting together a program that we want to hold in late September. And we're going to invite the homeless community to one of our parks. We're going to feed them. We're going to have resources like these ladies here for the homeless to come and seek out resources. We figured this was a great idea for having a special event strictly for the homeless to come and look at resources. So that's another idea that you may want to think about for your community as well.
Thanks, Dave, and that was completely Dave's idea to do that, and it's just a great way for the city to have a good interaction and do the right thing and a good optic too. So guess what? I talked about experts and I said there's a whole bunch in the room, and now it's your turn. And I have already talked to Colorado Springs about talking about a couple of things that they're doing that are a little bit different. You're obviously getting a fair amount of police perspective in this, but we work together and you know, and then again, when they're done talking about some of the things they're doing and you ask questions of them, you know, who's next, who wants to talk about what they're doing, what's working, what's not working, what they see. Obviously, you know, some of us from the perspectives we have don't really understand the parks role like you guys do either, so you're up. Thanks.
Okay, I'm Megan Swenning. I'm with Colorado Springs Police Department. Been on the homeless outreach team for almost 3 years now. The team originally started in 2008. It's evolved quite a bit. Probably 3 years ago when I joined, they started having caseworkers ride with us weekly. So 3 times a week we have Homeward Pikes Peak. They're a service provider. They have an outreach team, so they ride with us and we'll contact individuals camping, and then if they need to do the housing survey, we have them get in contact with them. We kind of step away because obviously people don't want to talk about drug issues and mental health issues when we're standing right there. So that has helped quite a bit, having those caseworkers ride with us. The 2 that ride with us, they actually were homeless as well, so that plays a big part in getting that trust, which is huge for our department and building that trust with the community. With the waterway, we had, I think it was 2018, we passed a waterway ordinance where it's illegal to camp within 100 feet of the waterway, the riparian zone we call it. So that has helped out with, you know, life and safety issues for flooding and stuff like that, and debris and trash that has gotten into our waterway. We also passed in 2019 an RV ordinance as well, saying people can't be on city streets unless they're loading or unloading, which is usually a 30-minute time period, and then unfortunately they get cited because we're getting a lot of RV campers now and stuff like that within our city. So we passed that in 2019. We do monthly chat meetings, which it sounds like kind of what you're doing with all the providers and OC Health and stuff like that, trying to get a good grip on, hey, we're having these issues. When we do cleanups, we usually have caseworkers with us. OC Health comes out with us to get people the resources, health, dental, vision, that kind of stuff throughout the city, so they're aware of what we have. We have 3 shelters in our city. One's mainly geared towards family. The other is for the general population, and then we have a youth shelter as well. So that's kind of what we do. We work Monday through Friday. We have right now 5 officers and a sergeant over our team, but that's kind of what we do. Any questions for me or my other 2 members? Yeah.
Share with us how y'all handle the everyday, not a violator because he's observing park rules at the time. Maybe sleeps in the pavilion at night, but out in the park during the day. Get the calls. How y'all address those type of calls?
Yeah, so we get a lot of those issues. We do have night officers. They're called our downtown response team. So they deal with like park hours overnight. But during the day, if they're just observing the park, obviously if they have alcohol, you can't drink in a park. So we'll address that issue. If they're just sitting there, then we say, hey, these are the park hours. You can enjoy the park, but once park hours are done, then you're going to be in violation. So we essentially just let them be, enjoy the park. But yeah, if they're smoking in the park, drinking in the park, if there's litter everywhere, we charge them with littering and that stuff.
Any criminal trespass or criminal trespasses issued?
No, the only time we do trespass is around the pavilions because there's chains now that say no trespassing because it is for usually renting out, and then the city will undo the chains. So if they are, then we will do the city trespass if they're in that chained off area. They did put out picnic tables in some of the parks now that there are chains, but that's just hanging out at the picnic table. So
Thank you.
Yep. For transit, you said?
For the different homeless people coming in and out, do you work with the surrounding cities like we're doing, say, with Tri-Cities, working together to try to?
So we work with El Paso County Sheriff's Department. They have a RIO team, a rural enforcement team, and they have I think it's only 2 officers that are homeless outreach that go to the camps and stuff. So we do work with them. North, I would say Monument, no, we don't. And Fountain, I think, is starting to realize that they're getting issues too. So I'm sure we'll work with Fountain. But yeah, we work with our sheriff's department quite a bit. Yep.
Who else has something?
Hello. Hey, I'm David. I'm the park ranger supervisor for South Suburban Parks and Recreation District. We have parks in the city of Littleton, Sheridan, Centennial, even some over in Greenwood Village, Columbine Valley, that whole area. Over 129 parks, 81 miles of trail, including the Platte River Trail south of Dartmouth. So we kind of butt up right there to Inglewood and Denver and that whole group. One thing that I think we've been really focusing on during our contacts with homeless that hasn't really been mentioned here is just focusing on mitigating their effects. We're very much aware that we can get somebody out of a park, we can get all their stuff cleaned up, they're just probably going to end up in another park. They're not going to go rent an apartment the next day. It's just not how it works. They need services, they need other things to be able to do that. So a lot of times I'm just focusing with them like, I understand that you're camping not really supposed to be camping here, but you know, if you are going to camp somewhere, you know, you need to, you know, leave no trace policies talks about being a certain distance away from riparian areas, kind of like those policies that you guys have at Colorado Springs. It also talks about just not leaving any trace and kind of talk to them a lot more about, you know, you're not going to get hassled if there's no effect. If there's no effect, there's no reason to look for a cause. And so if we can minimize the effect, mitigate the effects here, it's going to help you guys to kind of, because a lot of times what I find is they just want to be left alone. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to do their own thing. But if we can help them do their own thing in a way that doesn't damage the parks, as a park ranger, that's what we're focused on, so that public safety aspect and the resource protection aspect. I actually find that's really helpful. I mean, majority of the camps that I find and communicate with people and talk to them about that, I don't have to clean those camps, and we don't have to hire people to clean those camps because we're working with them to kind of do that themselves, develop a positive relationship to where they know we're on their side. They know we're trying to help them out, so we give them trash bags. I have one ranger that'll sometimes even give people cigarettes or a McDonald's meal or something like that if they can clean up an area for them. Anything that kind of takes that away from the rangers and the parks budget. Obviously, not everybody's receptive of that. And we do have to go out. I spent a good 6 hours cleaning out a camp yesterday. But I think that's really helpful a lot. I would say 60 to 70% of the camps I come in contact with will clean themselves up because I'm able to have that relationship with them. But beyond that, you know, we work with the city of Littleton a lot with addressing this. We meet with city of Littleton and a couple other people from Arapahoe County Open Space and a couple other people regarding these issues. But our issues are much smaller than Inglewood or Denver or probably even Colorado Springs. So it's a little bit easier for us park rangers to be able to just have those personal relationships because we don't have a million really urgent calls to go out to. So I think that's one thing is you guys can use your park rangers, I think, somewhat to be kind of that intermediate kind of step between both providing services and also enforcement, because we can do the enforcement but also connect people with services and spend a little bit more time. I tell my rangers, you know, I'd rather them have a 2-hour-long contact to help somebody find the solutions they need than to make 20 contacts in a day. Basically saying, like, let us know if we can help you guys out a little bit more, because I think we're all getting pretty good at it. We all have a passion for it. I specifically am hiring rangers with experience. You know, the last full-time ranger I just hired has 15 years of experience working as a counselor, has a PhD in the field. And so we're recruiting people to kind of address these issues since they are popping up so much within our parks, and I'm making sure that we can help them out best as we can. But yeah, that's that.
We really need to get you guys to change the trend meetings at least periodically.
Yeah, I definitely want to join in on that. I have a ranger that's really passionate about this. I think he'd be able to do that every week.
We had a conversation and he never reached back out to me. So tell him, hey, yeah, you know, that's a great connection, and you do have very minimal parks in England. We have our own parks district with a little bit of overlap. And the video that you all saw that you mentioned, for some of you that don't know the area, that's south of Dartmouth, the trail actually starts just a little bit north of there. And we were hoping in this whole cleanup effort that it was a south suburban park too, but we found out they only had a 10-foot easement. So we had to start from ground zero. And I think Dave kind of mentioned this, but the ultimate solution to cleaning up the river, the second time, the first time was a failure. That was based on some former city leadership that didn't get things in place. And what we did, instead of a camping ordinance, because of the contentiousness of that, is ended up changing our parks ordinance to include open space. So specific language that includes the Platte River and other open spaces in the city. So the designated parks, you know, all have the rules that you are familiar with. It's closed from X hours to X hours, no alcohol, no smoking, whatever those rules are. But those rules now encompass all our open space too. So that really helps us solve that problem. Who else has something for us? Yeah, microphone right ahead of you there. Texas has got it.
All right, my name is Ashley Rude, and I'm with the City of Westminster. I'm the homeless navigator there. Relatively new to the position. I was nonprofit beforehand, but I'm with the Parks and Recs department. Kind of my position is going out doing outreach and then trying to do that long-term case management as well. Team of one, so I really rely on like referrals from the parks and then also PD. So kind of with that outreach is just going out to parks, open space, and trying to connect with people on the spot, really like, would you like some water? Here's some hygiene. Here's my card. Can we do services in that moment, or can I connect you later in time, kind of if you're ready? With parks employees, kind of how it's super helpful is they already have that rapport. You know, they have that first interaction. So giving out my card, if I can't do it in that moment, it's like, okay, then it's showing an individual who's willing to engage in services in some kind of aspect. We do, and then same thing, we have 2 parks PD, and so they're really, really helpful as well. We do have a task force. Again, I'm pretty new to the role and we haven't met yet. And so I think from this panel, I'm starting to realize there needs to be more communication, kind of how can we all work together. But yeah, so still kind of figuring it out. I think that's all I have for Westminster, unless you guys want to talk too.
Yes.
So I forgot to mention another good resource that we have. A prior member to the team, he reached out to Bomba Socks and filled out an application. So now we get 2,500 pairs of Bomba Socks each year. So we hand out trash bags and Bomba Socks and stuff like that. But that's another good resource. If you just fill out the application with Bomba Socks, they'll more than likely give you guys donations of socks each year, so.
It's maybe something that some of the parks people might want to think about too, and oftentimes your police department will have an excess supply. People love to do sock drives over the holidays, and then we end up with thousands of pairs and don't have the capacity to store them and give them out. So just food for thought, and I think, you know, the water is definitely another idea for people out there, for your parks employees, if that's something that you want to do minimal amounts of easy outreach to. Back to you guys. Many of you have spoken and contributed, and thank you. And you know, what are we missing? What questions do you have for anybody in the room?
Got my share of time, but just want to mention one more thing, is that in Dallas, one of the greatest challenges is just different demographics within the city. You know, some of them have that mentality, just get them off my park. We don't want them off my parkland. And then the others have compassion and they want to see the right thing done. And, you know, so, and we even have that difference of philosophy within our park board members. So one's ready to move forward with, hey, you know, let's just go ahead and you know, get some housing. Let's start these programs. And then the other parts of the city, their constituents in that part of the city are not having it. And they just don't want them in the parks whatsoever. So that's the greatest challenge. That's why at times I ask about the law enforcement, but I'm also asking about these programs. Because it just within my area, I have the different ways of approaching it. And then one thing I've learned from being out in the streets is, you know, that if resources weren't an issue and they're available, every solution is going to be different. Every encampment has a different solution. If it came down to it, so that's why it's always good to have the programs. Or some of them might need law enforcement, and they may need to be behind bars to break that dependency issue. I don't know, you know, but just wanted to share that. That's why I was bouncing from inquiring about this and this and this, just for that reason.
You have a lot of insight, and thank you for coming up, and, you know, big city insight and differences. And, you know, many of us are in Colorado, and the political environment here is different than it is in Texas. And we're actually seeing a migration of people to Texas right now. I don't know if you've noticed that yet or not, but we tend to like to trade states, and it's always, grass is always greener somewhere else. So thank you for that. And in terms of what you mentioned in the homeless world, that's called NIMBY or NIMBYism, and that stands for
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. So, and that's definitely an issue that's out there. Many people are sympathetic to the issue of homeless, as long as it's in your city and not mine. And, major obstacles that we all face. And certainly that the topic of homelessness is very polarizing in many environments. But, at the end of the day, these are still people. And, we as professionals still have to deal with them as people and look for what are the best resources and solutions. And that's what we do. This whole thing that you've seen has come together over the years, kind of by accident and not because we looked at any program. Now we look at some programs sometimes and, dig a little bit deeper, but it just happened and happened and happened and happened. And it's a national model to use a program like, what you've seen here. And this has been incredibly successful, largely because of Mike. He's a great leader. You heard him speak. That's why he spoke and I didn't. And so yeah, thank you to him. And if you do have questions about that, from other states, regions, whatever, feel free to reach out. And I'm sure he'd be happy to talk about how do you invent this, but it takes a lot of buy-in, and I don't think you mentioned, Mike, I know there's a lot of information going out there, but Change the Trend really encompasses a broad base of organizations. Of course, All Health Network is deeply involved in it. Tri-County Health Department, which is the health department for about half of the metropolitan area around here, is involved in it on a regular basis, and we do everything from hepatitis outbreaks with them, with the homeless, to how do we get COVID vaccines. We worked with them as a city to open a vaccine clinic that we could get homeless people into. And really just I'm working with a public defender that's part of that group that's housing people out of the jails and has a nonprofit doing that, and I remember working with her 20-some years ago, and I didn't like her very much. She wasn't very nice. But now we're looking at the same issues and how do we help people, because we realize that the system is broke, the justice system is broke, the mental health system is broke. The mental health system in Colorado is drastically underfunded. I'm not sure any state has enough, but we certainly struggle deeply and find ourselves as the mental health catchment. And you as parks people, yeah, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing so much of that. So I don't have anything else. I think we're going to be done about 15 minutes before your official lunch break.
I was curious about one thing. Just out of curiosity, is anybody using veterinary care as a form of outreach? Because I deal with a lot of camps with dogs, mainly dogs, and I know we talk about trying to get, different types of dental and medical and things like that. But I'd say probably a quarter of the camps that I'm have some sort of animal, mainly a dog. So I was just curious about that, about if there was, volunteer groups that could come in and at least do shots and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of self-serving, because if you get bit, it'd be nice to know at least at a rabies shot, but,
Yeah.
And I'm thinking as a form of outreach would be a great way to get those services in front of. So anyway, it was just a thought.
It'd be an interesting conversation to have with the Humane Society, the local Humane Society, and see if that's something that they can help coordinate. I know when I've talked to folks, when I've talked to folks, sometimes I'll just talk to them about, there's only one shelter in the Denver metro area that takes pets. So sometimes we'll talk about that, because that is such a barrier to people being sheltered, is if I can't take my pet with me, you might as well tell me to cut my arm off. Like, it's not happening, which is understandable. I feel the same way about my pets. So I've talked to people. The only shelter that I'm aware of that takes animals is the Comitis Center in Aurora. And they do have to show proof of like rabies vaccination and just some basic vaccinations. But that's an interesting idea to approach people, talking about we can connect you with veterinary care. Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny, not necessarily like in the parks or on trails, but a lot of times when we approach people who have animals, they'll say that their animal is better taken care of than they are, both by design, because that's the way they want it, but people are a lot more sympathetic when they see people with a sign on a street corner and they have an animal. So a lot of times I've had people tell me I have more dog food than I have food for myself, because people will drive by and they'll drop off supplies if they see that you have a pet with you. But I like that idea. That'd be interesting to explore. No, it's a good thought.
Yeah, in the Springs, we have, it's called Street Pets. So it's 2 veterinarians that volunteer their time. They come out by the soup kitchen every Thursday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. They'll do vaccines each week. They'll give them collars, leashes, food. I know if it's too hot or too cold, they can't do vaccines just because of the temperatures and stuff like that, but they do have a program in the spring, and it's called Street Pets. Yep.
College students in like pre-vet science or biology, or possibly veterinary students that are looking to get additional time doing things like vaccinations or just general wellness checks, that would probably volunteer to do a lot of that. So
That's a great idea. Mike and I met several weeks ago with a group out of Oklahoma City. They run the only shelter in Oklahoma City. Care OK? City Care OK is their name. It's the only shelter in Oklahoma City, but they have pet kennels for people and are pet friendly and also family friendly, and really design kind of a low barrier shelter with a navigation center that is a pretty impressive model. Obviously different in different cities. You know, Colorado Springs talks about what they have 3 different shelters that, you know, that's an isolated area. Dallas, we have 12 shelters or whatever in the Denver metro. You know, you probably have 30, and then there's more in Fort Worth, but just resources that we have, and you know, things to think about. We do, with Change the Trend, also print material with shelter options and resources, and make those available. Again, for you guys, that's why we need somebody there, because you're having a lot of outreach, and you're definitely nervous. I sometimes think I just am dense to it. We are definitely looking at an option and seeking funding for this from the American Recovery Act. Is that right, Mike? For Bridge House?
It's through, I don't know if it's ARPA, it's through like a special grant program through the Senate.
Yeah. We're excited about, did you not know that?
No, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I was just saying that we're excited about the potential of Bridge House coming, and we just are continually looking at how do we solve this problem and how do we work into it. What I really love about this program, especially for this audience, is that this comes full circle, and these people actually come out of the program and contribute to your needs. And does anybody in here not have hiring issues? We're paying our topped out police officers really close to 6 figures right now, which if you're out of state, that sounds like a tremendous amount of money. It's not, because housing is incredibly expensive here. It's unbelievable how expensive it is in the kind of former blue collar city that we're in. I think you can buy a lot for $300,000. If it has a house on it, it's usually pressing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, upwards, and it's crazy, and it's all compacted in. But anyway, it's great to see this come full circle. I kind of talked about Mike Sandgren earlier. He's here. He had a 9 o'clock meeting. We have a 9 o'clock meeting every Thursday that changed the trend. I am just going to let him explain to you what it is, how it works, how the group works together, who's a part of it, and why it works, and why it's important. Like, you've heard it. I can't tell you enough how important it is to have a group of people that you work with, because nobody solves the problem by themselves. Nobody can hardly touch the problem by themselves. So, Mike, it's all you, and I'm going to turn this off while you address.
Are engaged in the issue and who are actually the direct service providers. It's just deeply valuable to equip you in your jobs to engage the issue in a productive way, and to be able to, you know, empower you when you find yourself in situations of not really sure maybe what the right thing to do to be able to, even hand a pamphlet or refer somebody to a partner agency that and trust and is going to be a productive experience for them to go to, is just deeply valuable. So that'd be my encouragement. Would welcome your participation formally in our network, and then also just more tangible, intangible encouragement to just lean into partnerships, lean into a networked approach to an issue like this, because it's a very complex issue. It's felt nationwide. Denver isn't alone in feeling the complexities and the burden of homelessness, but it does take kind of all stakeholders at the table in order for truly kind of holistic solutions to emerge. So any questions for me or comments? Yes.
Would it be open to people who are out of state that may want to just Zoom in to learn a little more about what's happening?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just send me an email. I have a distribution list that the agenda and Zoom link goes out every week. If we have some folks who just join, listen in, don't necessarily participate too much, but it's just an information gathering opportunity for them. So yeah, there's not necessarily an expectation of complete full participation in the meeting if folks do just want to join just to learn. Yeah, and actually a lot of folks do move into further participation and start by just kind of observing and learning.
Can you share your email?
Yeah, it's mike@wellspringinglewood.com.
What was that?
Wellspring Inglewood. Yeah, just shoot me an email, and I can get your name and email on the distribution list. And yeah, we meet again every Thursday morning, 9 to 10. That's why I was late this morning, and we send out the agenda and Zoom link every Wednesday afternoon. Any other questions? Great, thank you.
In that Tri-Cities area, and our group actually, is actually, we have partners that are just down the street here in Aurora too. So things to think about in terms of how can you as parks employees have a bottle of water, have a pamphlet, low involvement with police, better contact, say, here's a resource list. Did you know this? You can get a lunch here. All right, anything else? Yes, Marlo?
I just wanted to make one final comment regarding participation in the political aspect of things. Even from a personal perspective, it's really important that you have your voice heard, because that determines where funds are put. If we're going to have housing built, if we're going to have a food pantry fund, just please let your voice be heard, because we cannot make these decisions without you. And when we're not down on the ground doing this work, it's really difficult when you have those faithful 100 in your ear knocking at the door. So you're passionate about this just like I am, and I would really just welcome your voices, regardless to whether or not you live in that city. It still matters because we're all connected.
Thanks everybody. And if you need anything, you've got Mike's email, and I'm on the City of Inglewood, Colorado website, easy to find. Happy to answer questions by email, and Dave is on there as well. Easy to get a hold of us, and we can route your request. Thanks everybody. Thanks for your participation.